Top Game with your host, Sammy Castro. Episode 17, Mi Hermana, Master Gunnery Sergeant Sara Clark, aka La Pistola. Admin note, I still have 12 unreleased episodes I'm working to get out the door. I appreciate your patience. I also want to express my gratitude for the support, either via social media in the form of shares, likes, comments, and reviews, but also to my silent patrons and donors who've assisted me either financially or in terms of scoping out the direction of this project. Not only have you provided critical feedback and rudder steers, but the pre-publication review of the content produced has been invaluable. Muchísimas gracias. Disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed on Top Game are those of the producers and or the guests appearing on the program and do not reflect the views and opinions of the United States Marine Corps or the Department of Defense. Thanks for tuning in. So that's an interesting question. So I actually, I have some music production software that I use. It's called Machina. And I actually was working on some sketches for your episode earlier today.
So I was going to say there's the intro to Girls, Beyonce's Girls. if I can make a request. It's long.
So that part can get me pulled off because of rights.
Well,
so
yeah, I didn't know how
with Machina, it's all royalty free, and I'm taking like loops and samples, and I can also take like synthesizers and layer it up on that. But make sure I got this right, because it doesn't seem like the sound's coming through appropriately. I know I got input, but no output.
While you're doing that,
Yep.
auditionable. Have you tested it with like Liz's voice or anything?
Have I tested it with Liz's voice?
Yeah, to see like
what?
I don't know.
Like how a woman would sound?
Well, yeah, or like I don't know. I don't know if you have to like tune it or anything.
No. Adobe Audition is probably one of the best audio production softwares I've ever had software packages that I've ever had the opportunity to work with. I played with Logic and which is an Apple product over the years. Vegas, which was a Sony product. Fruity Loops.
I'm sorry, what? Fruity Loops?
Yeah, Fruity Loops. It's actually a very popular software production digital audio workstation. Some would argue that it's not a full-on DAW, but to most people, you can make music with it. So that's audio work. Then another one that I used in the past was the Reason by Propeller Heads. Bunch of nerds that got into audio engineering, and but Machina is the one that I'm using now, but it's not a complete solution. Machina is what I use for music production, but for the purposes of like recording this and capturing.
Are you recording right now?
Yeah. You okay with that?
You wait till I'm done eating.
It's all good. Kind of captures the moment.
Yeah.
So here I sit at the dining room table of Master Gunnery Sergeant Sara Clark. How does it feel to hear me say that?
I mean, just like every promotion, it takes a while to get used to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what does Master Guns mean? Because it's the pinnacle, right?
Yeah, Yeah, it is. I mean,
at least for us.
Yeah.
The path that we chose.
Yeah. I didn't think I'd ever see Master Guns. I mean, that was never my intent when I went to MEPS and joined the Marine Corps, was ever to see Master Guns. This wasn't what I wanted as a career. Because it was pre 9/11. I mean, so the military was, at that time we hadn't seen, there was Desert Storm, Desert Shield or whatever. But that was, we were kids. I saw yellow ribbons around trees, but I didn't really,
What does that mean? Yeah.
Yeah. You didn't understand it. It was something that happened on TV far, far away, It's not even real, really, because it was on TV.
So you don't have a military in your family?
So I have an uncle who did some Air Force time, my mom's brother, and my grandfather, who will actually who means a lot to me. He did some Army time.
Right.
So, but that's it. But it was never anything that was like, like this was like a lineage thing or heritage thing. Nothing like that. No,
like
and definitely not
Lieutenant Dan. Yeah,
definitely not the women in my family.
I know I have quite a few men in my family that served either in the Navy, the Army, one Marine, and it's an interesting tale, and I've been digging into it more and more lately because of where I'm at. But he was a PFC with 1-1 Charlie Company in the Korean War, and they never found his body. So I think he's officially declared KIA, but he's still missing in action as well. But I did get a chance to talk to some of his unit, and for those guys, it happened yesterday.
Yeah.
And as I was listening to their stories and then reading some of the accounts of the Battle of Horseshoe Ridge, where I think it was near Chuncheon, depending on who you ask, because we anglicized the pronunciation of Korean, so maps will have the different spellings. But it was a horrific tale, and some of the guys had mentioned like the pile of bodies of the Chinese that were coming up to attempt to overrun their position, and where they had kind of dug in. They were very well fortified. And Ruben Adame, my grandfather's uncle, they used to call him Sambo. They sent him back to get more ammo, and they never saw him after that. And the best that they could hypothesize was that he fell down the ridge line and would have had to come back up the same way that the Chinese were, but they never saw him again.
Yeah.
But you can finish your food. You don't have to stop.
What the sound effects?
Yeah, it'll be all right.
Okay. But you had asked, what did my family think?
Yeah, what did your family think about you joining the Marine Corps?
So my mom was angry.
Angry?
Yes. The impetus of me going back to the recruiting station and actually driving there in the first place and trying to figure out what the next step was. I had nobody in my family at that point, and I think still even have graduated from college. Nobody's done it. They're all blue collar workers in like Nebraska and stuff. They grew corn and raised animals and just kind of lived that way. Salt
of the earth kind of people.
Right. Railroad, and so my mom, I had the grades, and I was going to go, and I was going to go to college, and I was going to do these things, and I had a plan, and I did one semester. My grandpa helped me. I only got, there wasn't really any scholarships for what I wanted to do.
What did you want to do?
Well, I'm still going to do it. So fine art, I was going to get my fine art degree. There's only like a few people in the world that have a PhD in fine art. And you can't study it at anyone's school. It's kind of this amalgamation of going all these different places.
Like a practicum and all of that. Okay.
So that's what I was going to do. And I'll still get there, but it's taken me about a 20-year, detour to get there. So, but I called my mom. My mom had called and she said, you have to come home. We can't afford for you to do the next semester. And I was about ready to head to classes. It was in the morning. And I was like, oh, man. And I knew what would happen if I went home because they had moved from Colorado down to Oklahoma. And so there wasn't really anybody left in my hometown that I could go back to and like be there. And so I knew what was going to happen. I was going to end up in a minimum wage job somewhere. I was probably going to end up settling down and having kids and just never doing anything. And so that just wasn't an option. It just was not an option to go home. So I drove from Gunnison, Colorado to Pueblo, which is about 3 hours through mountain passes and stuff. Drove back to Pueblo because that's where I knew the recruiting station was there. And I went in. I actually went into the Air Force's office first.
What?
Yeah. So, because the Air Force Academy is huge down there.
Right.
And so, I mean, it's right there in Monument, Colorado. And it was always really just prestigious, like, because you would drive by and you would see the big cathedral out there and stuff. I mean, it's beautiful against the mountains and stuff. And so, and I could get the letter. I could get the congressional letter to go. So I knew that because my mom knew someone back home that I could get it from. But anyways, so I went in there first. But when we had taken the ASVAB, so the school that I went to let the recruiters come in and give us the ASVAB. The whole senior class sat down and took it in the auditorium. My senior class was like 160 people. And I was trying to figure out, I'm like, what's this for? Asking everybody around me and stuff. And they're like, oh, it's to go into the military. And all the service members were standing up there on the stage, the recruiters in their uniforms. And I was like, I'm not going to go in the military. So I turned my bubble sheet sideways and I drew a picture with the bubbles.
What'd you draw?
I just did like a mountain range, and I did like a Christmas tree with two of the columns, right. I scored a 65. Drawn a picture. So
well played.
Yeah, right. So it was the Air Force recruiter. I kept trying to convince him. I said, let me retake the ASVAB this time. Like, let me retake it. I can get a better score.
Right.
And they had all our GPAs on file there in the recruiting office. So he looks it up and he sees that I graduated with a 4.25 because I had taken some honors classes. And I was like, trust me, like, let me retake it.
Right.
Like, I didn't even really take the test, And he was like, no, people do worse the second time around. And he was just kind of skeezy. Like, so I was just like, I don't feel like I'm kind of getting a good deal here.
Right.
So he pulls out the MOSs and he says, you can be admin. And they were just kind of nothing to be interested in. I was like, man, those sound like kind of the minimum wage jobs I'd be doing anyways,
Right.
Well, my high school sweetheart had joined the Marine Corps. And the recruiting office was right across the hall from the Air Force recruiter, right? So I was like, well, I know those guys because I had gone to a couple pulley events with him. So I was like, well, I'll just go over and talk to Staff Sergeant Rubio was his name. I said, I'll just go over and talk to him, So I told the Air Force guy, I was like, thanks. I think I'm going to go across the hall. Yeah.
Good game.
He goes, well, hold on. Let me go set it up for you over there. So this jerk gets up and walks across the hall and he's like, yeah, she wants to join the Marine Corps because her boyfriend joined the Marine Corps. The recruiter had a perfect response. He's like, I don't care why she wants to join. He's like, she wants to come join, let her join. Who cares?
Yeah.
It's up to you. So I walked over and sat down and he was like, he didn't pull out the tiles. We didn't do that whole thing,
No.
He just...
I think you got cheated. I love that piece.
He knew he had me though because he says, what do you want? And I said, I want money for school. That's what I want. And now, mind you, remember, this was pre-9/11. So, at that time, you joined the military either because of legacy reasons or money for school.
Right.
And so I said, I want money for school. And he was like, okay. He says, do you know anybody else that wants to join? If you can find somebody else who wants to join, we'll give you a scholarship. And I was like, okay, yeah. I go to college with a bunch of poor kids. Like, give me a little bit. So I actually ended up joining with a friend of mine, Jess. We met... in high school on a tour for like underprivileged kids. You had to come from like a single family income or your parents had to make below a certain amount in order for you to get this. And you paid $35 and they took you on a bus trip between these 4 different colleges. They're Colorado State, schools. And they'd take you on this bus trip. They paid for a hotel, they paid for food, they paid for everything, but they took us around to these different schools, basically just trying to break the cycle,
Right.
And I'd met her on that because we were roommates with this other chick that was just drama. So Jess and I kind of bonded, but then we ended up going to Western State together. So I went and talked to her and I was like, hey, this is kind of where I'm at. I'm like, how are you doing on money? And she's like, she's like, I've got to figure something out. And I was
Right.
like, well, he's going to give me a scholarship. And she's like, I mean, all right. So the recruiter, he came up and talked to her and stuff. And she was like, yeah, I'll do it. You know, and he got her like a signing bonus for the MOS that she got or whatever. So I called my mom and I was like, Mom, I'm going to join the Marine Corps. And I just think she was scared. I think she was more scared than anything. And she was like, what? What are you talking about? No, you can't join the Marine Corps, you know, like, and I think like her, I think she was afraid, like, I mean, any parent, you know, like that a war would break out and then I would have to go. And so.
Yeah, because around that time we were due.
Yeah. I don't really recall like world events at that time. Like I don't, you know, so I don't know maybe what she was looking at or seeing or thinking, but I think it's just the fear of just, you know, any parent, you just worry, you know, in any occupation, like your child says, I want to be a firefighter. And you're like, man, at some point in time, they might have to run into a burning building, you know? But anyways, so she said, they make you cut your hair. And I was like, I don't know if they're going to make me cut my hair out because
shave it off.
Yeah, because I've got curly hair, you know, so you cut it short and it's a little crazy. So I was like, I don't know. I'll have to ask the recruiter. So I asked and he said, no, we used to make you cut it to everybody, and all the females in recruit training would have to cut it to their chins. But we stopped doing that because we want our females to look female. I remember him saying that. And so my mom was like, okay, but if you make her cut her hair, I'm coming after you. And so Ruby was like, okay. So
noted.
Yeah. So, I think she was scared for me, you know, as any mom would be. And then, my dad just really was never in the picture growing up. So when he found out, he was like, I think I'm kind of I'm the middle kid. So of my 3 sisters, and then my mom had 2 children later on with my stepdad, but I was like 15 and 16. So there's a pretty big gap there. But my dad was just kind of like, I mean, okay, you know, he had wanted to go into the Army, but he has a very deadly allergic to bee stings. And my grandma, because this was during Vietnam, so my grandma went and told the recruiters and basically ixnayed him joining. So he couldn't, for health reasons, go into the Army. So he was pretty bummed about that. But so I think he was proud, but I mean, he doesn't matter. So yeah, whatever. My grandpa told me, which is what he always would tell me, which was, he was like, whatever you're going to do the best at it. Just don't leave streaks in your underwear. That's what he'd always say. Good advice. I think I made him proud. You know, but he just wanted to see me succeed.
Sage advice. Yeah.
Succeed at something. And I told him, I said, I'm just going to do one tour. I'm going to get my GI Bill, and then I'm going to go to college, and I'm going to do these things. I was going to go to the Art Institute of Seattle. I wasn't even going to go back to Western State in Colorado because now I'd have money. I could go to a school anywhere.
Wherever you wanted, yeah.
Right. So I was going to go to Seattle after that first term. So everybody else was just kind of like, okay, you know, like, you're going to go do this, you know. So, but they're proud now, you know, like, I mean, I think they were proud that I made it and that, you know, I became a Marine. And then every time I've been promoted or anything like that, they're always, they're proud.
So you're the oldest of how many?
No, I'm the middle. So,
oh, I thought you were the oldest.
No, I act the oldest.
Maybe that's what it is. I met one sister.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. You met my one's just younger than me. I took care of her. That's why it seems like I'm the oldest, because my older sister is she's crazy. So she acted like the middle child. And then I acted like the oldest, and just I'd cook and take care of them. And
there's three sisters.
3 of us that were raised together, and then my mom remarried with my stepdad and had a little boy and a little girl. So my brother and sister. My little brother was born when I was 15, and my little sister when I was 16. So I kind of always mothered all of my siblings. So
okay,
or big sistered them, I guess you could say.
Yeah, so it was just me and my brother, and then my parents divorced. They both had a daughter each with their second marriages, and then my stepmom had 2 from her previous marriage. So we went from just me and Daniel to me, Daniel, Nina, Melanie, Isaac, and Monica. Yeah. So but I'm the oldest of all of them. But I mention that because being in the Marine Corps, I wasn't there for my sisters for the majority of their childhood, because Melanie was like 15 years younger than me. And so she was like around 8 when I joined up. And then Nina was born after I checked into Monterey. So, for them, Sammy was, big brother gone, off doing his own thing. But that doesn't mean that I didn't have sisters around me. And, starting off at DLI, there were some of the Marines that I was close with were like Kelly Kuduk and Rachel Pavlik and others. And then when I got to Radio Battalion, that's where I met you for the first time, and we hit it off immediately. I think a little bit of it was I recognized instantly that you knew your shit, and you weren't afraid to express your observations and opinions. And for me, and if anybody listening to this knows Elizabeth, that's exactly the kind of woman that I married. And so, having you there in Alpha Company at that point in time where I was just checking in, as a sergeant, not knowing what the fuck I was doing, and they said, "Here's a team and figure it out." I had some help, guys like Aaron McLean and Ted motherfucking Hulskamp and Lamagna.
Oh my God, Hulskamp. Yeah. That guy could make color TV out of like a bubblegum wrapper, a coat hanger, and like a glass bottle. He was insane with the stuff that he just knew. McLean had that flight crew checklist everybody wanted, but he wouldn't let anybody make copies of. Yeah. Yeah, but Hulskamp, man, that guy, Jesus.
So McLean did share his flight crew checklist with me.
Oh, well, you're special.
Yeah, well, it's because my first field ex, he was my ATO, even though he was getting ready to PCS out. They figured they'd give me kind of like a head start, and it helped. But yeah, I mean, checking into Rapid, and of course I had to humble myself with the Lance Corporals because there were some around that knew what the hell they were doing, and that was instrumental in me kind of like on ramping, because back then at Lejeune it was an interesting time because the war had already kicked off and deployments were going on a regular basis, and then of course there was the ever faithful MEU debts that were prepping up to go out the door, and then I think it was Gunny Palladino.
Okay.
At the time, came up to me and said, "Hey, you want to go to Bolivia?" I was like,
"Oh yeah."
I was like, "Fuck yeah, yeah." And so I had those little one-offs deployments. Came back from Bolivia, and they said, "Hey, you're going to Haiti." Okay. It's like, when am I going to the desert? Like, there's Afghanistan and Iraq kicking off, and keep sending me elsewhere. And I didn't know enough then to say, shut the fuck up and appreciate it, because you'll get time to do the desert thing.
Well, we didn't know it was gonna last so long. Last time we were in there was, it went quick. So we had no idea it was going to be a decade and a half later,
Yeah. And it, I mean, it's been almost the entirety of our careers. Right. But, all of that to say that when you look around the landscape, when you're at a dynamic unit like Second was at that time, you sync up with individuals that you get along with, not only personally but professionally, and so I want to say that I appreciate all the support, camaraderie, friendship that you've given me over the years, because it's been helpful. I never felt like I was out of place or embarrassed by saying, I don't know what the fuck this is. I need some help. And you've always been more than willing to oblige in that regard. But that's not always the case.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, in this occupational field, which can sometimes be esoteric, you'll find little niche areas of expertise, and like you said, like Aaron McLean kind of wants to hold on to that, right? I want to be the only person that knows how to use this piece of gear or this piece of equipment or that system. But one of the things that I was kind of buttoned my head up against when I was at SOTG as an instructor with one of the team leaders was, we have an obligation to grow beyond just your team or your detachment or your company. But General Henry said it at the beginning of the data summit last week, was that at some point in time, you have to start thinking we.
Yes.
And when was that for you?
So because go back to birth order, because I was the middle kid, and there were 3 girls, I never had anything that was just mine. And I didn't have a special place in the family so much. Like I had to make it, right? And so I did that by getting good grades and being the kid that was easy for my mom to deal with, and didn't break her rules, and I didn't want to give her any more of a hard time. But doing that type of stuff too, like I also wasn't a worry. So like my older sister, she's crazy. She's doing what Crystal does. And so she was always garnering attention because she was doing crazy shit, right? And then my baby sister...
It's okay, you can cuss.
My baby sister... she was like the cutest kid ever, right? So she was always like, oh, she's so cute, she's a baby. So she always got like that attention or whatever. And then I was just always kind of there, So like team it wasn't a stretch for me. It wasn't difficult. It wasn't like, I just did what they told me to do, which was, like we all had to do this together. So all those mass punishments at boot camp, I'm like, yeah, this is how it is, and everybody around me is like, this sucks, this isn't fair. And I'm like, shut up. If you guys all do this, we don't get punished, like all of us together. Right. But so I think coming out of my childhood, when we always we had cousins around, or we were always at babysitters because my mom worked like 2 and 3 jobs. So there was always other kids around, and of course, if one kid screwed up, mass punishment back then too, everybody gets a spanking. Yeah. So I don't know. It was always, I think I got it from that we were always just as good as we were going to be if, all of us as a whole. So, and it made sense, like you're only as good as your weakest guy. And it infuriated me when.
But it seems like we learned that, initially, but then at some point in time we forget it. And maybe it happens sometime around sergeant to staff sergeant, where you're trying to separate yourself from your peers. For me, it was, I want my team, my platoon, whatever the case may be. I wanted my unit to be the best. We. But I was thinking like a smaller we, not like a capital we, like Marine Corps we, for quite a while. And but when I was thinking team, you were thinking platoon or company. And I was thinking about that on the drive over here. And that was one of the characteristics that I saw in you, even down to like when we linked back up at Goodfellow. And, you were thinking about the schoolhouse. I was just thinking about my course. And maybe that was a little bit of by virtue of the fact that you were teaching Mark, right? So you're touching the entire OC field, and I'm just thinking my MOS. But that was one thing that you did better than most of our peers in that time frame, and I was curious to know like what triggered that. Yeah. But how do you now, as Master Guns Clark, how do you impart that upon others? How do you get them to open up?
Ooh, open up and thank the team?
Yeah.
So.
Especially because where you're headed and where you are. Yeah. I mean, and this isn't by, accident. I mean, I've kind of thought this through, DCI is larger than just intel. It's information, and everything that goes underneath that umbrella. We got to learn to play nicely. Yeah. And when I was we were at MGySgt and I could already tell there's a difference between IAD and IWID.
Yeah.
Intelligence Integration Division and Information Warfare Integration Division. And, I was there for the brief where they were talking about, hey, we need to pull out the EWSTs and stand up an EW battalion. And there's a lot of people who feel strongly that that's not the case.
Yeah.
And I would say I'm one of them. I think you are too. But how do you carry on that mindset in the world that you're in and where you're headed out of MGySgt? So
it has been very challenging up at I department. Right now, the last year has been, and I know Scoggins talked about it when he did his interview, and he knew, they knew it was going to be a fight, him and Mush and the things they did and the stuff they put into play. I got up there, I picked Scoggins' brain, because I had to buy in too. And a knee-jerk reaction when I heard about EW splitting out from SIGINT, I was like, "What? No, it's bullshit. We do them together. We do both. We can change back and forth." And after talking to Scoggins and stuff, and I really appreciate him because he doesn't hold punches, but he has such a great way of keeping it. I don't want to say professional, but he doesn't make it personal. As he's explaining it to you, he's just he's like, no, it's not like that you don't get this. It's that here's why this isn't gotten, it's a much better way of doing business. And I really have to say, I appreciate that about him, but he did, I chewed on him because I was like, I don't understand why. And, right. we need to call, how about we call them all instead of having SSTs and EWSTs? How about we call them all, electromagnetic spectrum support teams, all of it's in the spectrum, and he was like, no. And he laid it down and explained it. And I bought in. I said, okay, it makes sense. It makes sense exactly why we had to call out the EW structure. But there has been a lot of resistance to it because of the same idea. We've always done it. We've always said we have done EW and SIGINT, together. And they are not mutually exclusive. They have to, they coincide, they're symbiotic, whatever. And so there has been a lot of resistance, and it's frustrating, especially at a headquarters, because you've got the OC field talking, they're saying one thing and they've got one message coming because they've got this kind of this TO hit, and then they're told embrace it, make it work. Yeah. They got no TE. They have nothing. But they've got these billets on this TO, and they're told, if the infantry asks for these teams, you're going to give them to them. And the Ray battalions are like, what are we going to give them? An MRE and a well wish? What? And then you've got headquarters trying to figure it out. You've got capability development that's trying to rush out ahead to get to, because of the way the palm cycle works and the way money's spent and the way things are acquired and stuff, that takes years. You wouldn't see the result for years down the road. Right. So you have to start thinking now, what is the environment going to look like in 2025, which is what we're all told to kind of focus there. But then you also have others that are trying to look for 2030. And then you're looking against a threat that we don't have that experience for that threat. Right. At all. It's completely outside of what we've gained experience in for the last decade and a half. It's like an antediluvian, pre-flood civilization, that we've almost got amnesia as an OC field with regard to that. But I do think that there are some fundamentals that'll translate over. But I wish I could be a team leader again. I got some emails. I always tell junior Marines when I was a MARC student, when I was a MARC instructor, and anytime they were part of my platoon, if they were on my watch floor, or even some of them seek me out from other companies and stuff like that. I always tell them, if you have any questions, anything, you reach out to me. And they're like, thank you. And I'm like, no, I seriously mean that. But you'd be surprised how many of them are like, hey, Master Sergeant, right. Just email me. I never would have emailed a Master Sergeant. Are you kidding me? But anyways, I appreciate yourself approachable. I appreciate it. I'm glad they do. And I've had a couple team leaders that are being told that, they're on these EWSTs and they're like, I don't know what to, so I had one reach out to me and ask, like, Master, what do you recommend? And I was like, I'm glad you asked.
So what did you recommend?
I recommend look around, look at your talent, look at your Marines sitting around, look at who needs to go, what 21s can go back to 451. Look at your 31s, make sure they get to OP-Lent. Do
but
things.
Those are combined now, right? The 21s and 31s?
No, they still are going to be 21s or 31s. They're not like a one MOS.
So I was under the impression that they were going to be merging.
No.
Okay.
And so 451 is important, definitely for EW and stuff, the way for the curriculum that it teaches, it's a skill that we haven't done signals analysis for a long time. And I think we only have a billet or two kind of off in other places. The E-learners are fantastic at it because that's all they do. Because they never have to worry. They don't worry about anything else. They just worry about the signal. Right. And so like I said, they're fantastic about it. But I told them also too, I said, do things, ham operators. I think that if Master Guns and a Cow,
ARRL.
if you ask them, if all of you guys get the classes, get the certifications, even if you don't do it, like that's fine, get that education as well. Yeah. Because I think they do a fantastic job of teaching, and they have time to teach us where we don't, in our pipeline. You have to pick it up quick and you got to move on because we got to graduate you and get you to the fleet. And I said, do that. And I said, find the classes are all over the internet. You can find them, teach them radio wave propagation over and over and over and over again. Teach them the math behind, antenna construction over and over and ad nauseum. Build antennas that are, that are difficult and challenging. Don't just stick with the basic, easy dipole or whatever, definitely like branch out and do the math for ones that you're probably going to fail at and they'll never receive or, anything, but try it and do it over. And so, I didn't hear anything from him. So I think he was like, oh crap.
Yeah.
So, he's like, last time I asked for her.
Yeah.
But yeah, so happened to at a headquarters trying to convince GS 14s, 15s, who by the way, I love hearing back when I was in the Corps, like, please give me some history. Cause that's where we're not even headed there anymore, And I love hearing Iraq and Afghanistan stories cause they're so applicable to where we're headed or not at all. But, so that's been very frustrating. And there's officers and, senior civilians that are retired. You've got to break them out of their bias. You've got to break them out of, they try to assimilate the information, everything that's changing. They're trying to assimilate it to what they know. It's human nature. It's what we do. And it's where they're comfortable. So they're trying to get the information to fit into a construct they understand, not realizing that these junior Marines that are all over the Marine Corps, not just 2600s, but all over the Marine Corps are far smarter than we were. They grew up with technology in their hand, So you
think they gave them an advantage or do you think, do you think that their level of intellect is actually higher based upon their environment or they just know how to use their tools and they're kind of enabled by that technology in a way that we weren't. And so because of that, they're better equipped, but not necessarily.
I don't know, and I'm not a doctor, and I would probably say though, they were making connections faster than you and I were analog, playing with sticks and dirts, and learning to read the way that we learned to read, right. Sight words and just memorizing things. They were hearing it and seeing it and touching and interacting with information technology. I knew my high school had a computer lab, but I never took computer class. Right. The first email address I ever had was in college. And it was the one they gave me. I had to sit down and have somebody teach me how to use it. I adapted quickly and our generation did. But these kids, I shouldn't say kids, but, they seem like kids.
So yeah, that happens pretty much every episode. It's always recognized as a term of endearment, not a in a condescending fashion. So. Well,
I always get accused of mothering my Marines, so I guess that's fair.
I've been called a boot hugger once or twice too.
So, but they are my family, so I don't mind. But yeah, no, I think that their brains made connections, and they they exist with this technology. We have to learn it and adapt to it, but they're already adapted. They just know it. It just is for them. And so trying to convince them that we don't understand the capability requirement. We don't. The Lance Corporal that's frustrated out there with a piece of gear that's crap, they understand it.
Yeah, I hated 8200s.
Yeah.
There's got to be an easier way to program in like your known freaks or yeah.
Right. And if we could take take any piece of equipment now that the teams are out there are just frustrated with and are like, this thing sucks.
Yeah.
Think if we could sit them down with the developer and do with what some of these big companies out there have done, sit them down there and say, how do you want to use it? What would be a better way to use it? What's the frustration? At what point, at what point do you reach the trough of suck? Let's fix the trough of suck. I think these Marine, the capabilities, they would take us so far beyond. And I think that they would do it cheaper than the way we're doing it now. Because we buy something now, it sucks. It sits on the shelf. We do these updates and these cycles that take forever to do when we should have come out the chute with something that was usable to begin with, I, sitting out at 3rd Radio Battalion in the OCAC watch floor, I had some E-learners that they kind of were just given they got to work a mission, and they got to push the boundaries on what they expected to be doing at a radio battalion as an E-learner. They came back and they were like, hey, Master, I want access to, some stuff. And I was like, okay. And they started talking, explaining it to me, and my eyes went crossed. I was like, I have no clue what you're talking about. And he's like, okay. I said, but I tell you what, you want access? He's like, I want access. I was like, write it down for me, man. Who do I send the access to? Who do I request it from? And he was like, this office. I was like, all right, got it. So I shoot off an email, didn't think anything of it. A couple hours later, I get a call and they're going, why are you requesting? I said, well, this Marine, hold on, let me call him in here. And this Lance Corporal, I call him in. I'm like, hey, can you explain to him what you want to do? And he's like, all right. So he gets on there and he just nerds out. And I'm like, oh, good. My head hurts. So he gets off the phone with the guy, and he hands the phone back to me, and the civilian on the other end says, hey, do you have any more like him? And I said, yeah, I've got a whole section sitting back there. He's like, I'll give him access. I was like, all right, cool, But it's just stuff like that. They humble me. I have to learn the stuff, but these kids they know it. It makes sense to them, and we haven't done right by this generation, giving them enough credit for just how smart they are and for just what they can do. That's for sure. We call them snowflakes, and we do things, and we say this stuff or whatever, and they just have a different way of dealing with stuff, different than we did,
Yeah, I was listening to the episode that I recorded with Mush from a QC standpoint before I release it, probably tomorrow. And we touched on the requirement for us to have some awareness or refined emotional intelligence in the way in which we apply the leadership traits and leadership principles, as opposed to just how it was packaged and handed to us, or thrust upon us, depending on how you view it. I don't know many master sergeants at 3MEF, at least, that was getting up and PTing with the Marines at 05 in the morning to about 07. Shower, change over, get back in the shop, and rinse, wash, repeat 3-4 times a week, like that. But that was how I got to know them better. Mm-hmm. And then the other part is, like, on the weekends, if they're up for it, I don't force myself upon them, right? But if they're up for it, I'll take them to the movies and out on Kadena because they don't have vehicles. Or I've hosted nerd out LAN parties at the house. And these Marines are showing up in my front door with, a full on suitcase with their desktop PC, monitor,
wow,
headphones. And the fact that, they feel comfortable to come to hang out with Top, that means something to me. Because, I do view them as, not my children, but my brothers, my little brothers. And I want to make sure that there's a level of trust and respect there that if there's something that pops up that they feel confident and comfortable enough to bring it to me. But, on the other end of things, I don't mind, just hanging out playing video games one night, And the boys, my sons, they love that too.
Yeah.
You know, so that they look forward to it. But that's kind of how I've learned to balance intrusive leadership with family and you know, and maintaining that type of environment. And that, you know, the last, I can't even remember, quite a few years, probably 15, 16 years. Liz will probably correct me, but we always have the Marines over for Thanksgiving. And, you know, now I don't carve the turkey anymore. I teach one of the young Marines how to carve a turkey.
Yeah.
Just like, you know, I expect that they would learn at home. But, you know, what do you do in order to kind of find that balance, you know, between the professional and the home life, and do you keep them separate?
Yes.
And why is that?
So it's just it's a little bit different for, and I don't want to make I don't want to generalize it, and I don't want to say that it's the way for everybody, because it's not. And I know other male leaders that are the same way. It's you have to strip. So the Marine Corps almost demands that I strip out my gender, right? It has to be, I can't make it an issue. If somebody else makes it an issue, I need to go ahead and figure out a way to make it a non-issue again, right? And that's on me to do that. I have to do that. And so keeping the professional away from the personal, you know, like Sara doesn't put on the uniform. You know, Master Guns Clark puts on the uniform. So it's just two different people, and it's just better that way, because Sara is a woman, you know, like that's the reality. But the Marine Corps' not built for that. It's there's no place for it. Right or wrong or indifferent, you know, I don't know. I think that in some situations it doesn't matter. In other situations it does. It helps if you strip it away a lot, and you get used to stripping it away, because in the situations that it does matter, it helps you get back to neutral quicker, you know. So for instance, being out on a team with males, you know, and you got to go pee, you know, and so it's like, you know, they just turn their back and just pee right there, and you're like, I mean, oh, okay, but you know, it's not the same for us. So I'm like, all right, well. And you just have to get to where you're comfortable with that. And so to be like, yeah, well, that, yeah, right. Or just with the guys like, hey, you know, I got to go pee. And they're like, all right, you know, and they do what they got to do or whatever. But that's what I'm talking about. Like, it's different. Everybody knows it, you know, like, but there's no point in saying anything about it. Like, let's just deal with it and get on with it. But you get used to doing that. So you get used to pulling your hair back, you know, you get used to not having fingernail polish on, not wearing earrings, you know, just not being that way. And then in my personal side though, like I want to paint my fingernails and you know, right. Like, I want to do those girly things. Like I want to wear pretty clothes. And so, it's just easier that like you kind of get into character, I guess you could say. And not that it's not me, but it's just another facet of me. And so you kind of have to, compartmentalize it, you know? And there's times and places where I can let Sara slip in, and that's, you know, like when, you know, Marines are in a bad spot or whatever, and they just need like that little bit of humanity maybe to get through something, you know, and you kind of strip it away and you give them some of that. And you know, you're like, yeah, you know, like I understand. And here's how I would deal with that, or here's my personal experience. And so you just balance it, but for the most part, keep it separate. So
it's just easier that way.
Much easier. Yeah.
Guess I never really thought about it that way. I mean, for me, I mean, you've known me for a while. I usually wear my heart on my sleeve, and that's just how I am. That's Sammy, and I just can't be any other way. But there's no repercussions for me being Sammy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can you let people too close, you become too accessible. And I think that's really kind of.
And I have done that though. There's been certain instances where I've gotten too close to certain individuals, and if I had to do it over again, I'd keep them at arm's length. But that approach has been towards the good, vice the bad, more often than not. So, I just chalk it up to those individuals, and just let that go. But there's a female gunnery sergeant that I'm really close to at 3MEF. She's a fireball. You'd like her, Sarah. And she's one of my jiu-jitsu training partners. She's really close with Enrique, my oldest. They roll together all the time. And when he's competing, she's his coach, because there's too much baggage between he and I for me to coach him in the middle of a competition. But Aunt Jasmine, she can say whatever she wants, and he's going to take it as gospel. But her and I are really tight. But I was having a conversation about a colleague that we both know. She's like, so and so. I said, yeah, but that individual, I wouldn't. If that individual was John and I'd throw them a kettlebell. She's like, I've never heard you say that about anybody. I said, well, for the most part, I pretty much get along with everybody. I mean, I might have some conflict, there might be some friction, but we'll work it out. But there could sometimes be those situations that pop up where you being open with someone, you being willing to kind of blur the lines between work and play can bite you in the ass. So let's kind of shift it up a little bit. I know you're going to MGySgt. You've been at I Department. You're the course supervisor for the Marine Analysis and Reporting course. Of those and others, what's been your most difficult assignment and why?
I think professionally, the most difficult assignment was MAR4 Cyber. When they were setting up, they were getting going.
So you're a plank holder.
I am. Yep. I think I have coin number 56 or something like that, or 58. I don't remember. I was the only. Well, no, Master Sergeant Starosto was there, but I was the only 2629 that was there. There was talk about it going to be an operational MAR4. So I had been at MAR4 PAC twice at that point in time, because I had been I'd been up there in the COC, so I'd been in the G3, and then I had been to the G2 at MAR4 PAC. So to go to a MAR4 that was going
what
to...
What they have you doing in the G3?
I was in the COC back before in the initial days of the war.
Okay.
Yeah, I was at 1st Rated Battalion, which was in Hawaii.
At what rank?
I was a corporal.
Okay.
Yep. So we had the cat stood up and stuff, and before MARCENT, became full up and everything, MAR4 PAC held that hat, and he had MAR4K, MARCENT, and MAR4 PAC, and then MARCENT came full up. And so it had been relinquished by that point. But so anyways, I was in the COC. But so to go to a MAR4 that was going to operate different than, what I understood. And then I was there with 0231s, 0261s, 0241s, and they were told to understand the cyber, and then they had called cyber out separate of SIGINT and said, it's different. And we all went, what? No, what? So they didn't have a common lexicon. They didn't have...
Words mean things.
Yeah, right.
Let's figure out what these words mean first. Yeah.
All the legal things hadn't even happened.
It's funny because we're in a lot of ways, we're doing that same fucking thing. With data science, ISR system engineering, information warfare, our AI strategy.
Yeah, but but there's a whole lot of stuff that's happened that has caused that that floodgate to, go full bore. So, before they would do controlled releases, when we were in the Middle East, but that's not where we're at now. That's not where the world's at now. Even out in the Middle East and stuff, they've adapted and we changed them, So now they fight different. They employ differently. Their TTPs are completely different, So a lot advanced. And we did that. We advanced that.
Right.
But so professionally, it was difficult because we were told to do this stuff. We didn't have any clear way to get it done. It's like they set us out in the middle of the field and they're like, okay, go to the grocery store. And we're like, wait, but there's nothing here. And they're like, yeah, right. And you're just like, I don't understand, So trying to explain, like there was a huge learning curve for the O2s that were sitting up there. Right. They did an awesome job though, embracing I could say I had some real rewarding conversations and teaching them how to use the data and stuff. But it was professionally really frustrating. Every day was frustration.
Yeah. Dave Owen was out there.
Yeah. Gecko.
And he eventually told me how he got that nickname.
Yeah. He told me too.
He doesn't tell everybody, but we're in the club. I was contemplating orders out there and he cautioned me. He said, like, Sam, it's probably not the play.
Yeah.
And I think part of it was him knowing me through the years. I think I was a gunny at the time when I was talking about it. He knew that I wouldn't have been happy there, and I heeded his advice, and ended up going elsewhere. But it was refreshing to kind of get his perspective. I ran across him when I was at DIA, going through some training, and it was great to catch up with him. And I've been meaning to snatch him up and record an episode, because he specifically was one of the mentors that I looked up to that made me think, I could be a Master Guns one day. Yeah. And if I was a Master Guns, that's the kind of Master Guns I would be. Because I remember when we were in Iraq in 2004, him rolling through, I think he was with Major Edgar. And he was completely blown away by the fact that I had stolen a 52 kilowatt generator from the Army, had them move it for me, and then connect it. And he's like he said, how did you? I said, we were having power problems, Master Guns. He's like, yeah, okay, but like how did? Yeah. And I kind of gave him the whole story, and he's like, so you only traded one Lance Corporal for that? Yeah, I said, yeah. He wasn't my Lance Corporal. He was somebody else's Lance Corporal. Belonged one of the engineer guys, engineer units on TQ. We kidnapped him and tossed him over as a hostage exchange. But that type of like vibe that I got off of him. He showed up, he took out his notepad, and whatever he wrote down, I knew I could just bank on the fact that he was going to follow through with it. And I wanted to be that type of leader. And I always kind of looked up to him. But for you personally, who have you looked to as like your touchstone, like that Master Guns?
Okay. So Master Guns, so I really enjoyed working for Paul Bergeron. Definitely. I like the way that he like.
What was that sigh for?
Because I'm trying to think of like how to say it. Like I love the way he just. So I was going out to 3rd Radio Battalion.
Just say it.
I was going out to 3rd Radio Battalion, and I had called him because he sent me to Marfor Cyber. He was the reason I had to go there. So he called me and told me, he said, I owe you, when I found out that's where I was getting orders to. And so I called him after I was getting ready to leave MCO. And I told him, I said, hey, remember you told me you owed me? And he started laughing. He said, yeah, I remember. And he said, what do you need? And I said, I want to come out there to 3rd. I want to work with you. And he was like, all right, all right, I'll see what he's like, have you called and talked to the monitor? I said, yeah, I'll go down and have the conversation and stuff. And he's like, all right. So,
and who was the monitor at the time?
The one right before Willie. I'll think of it here in a minute.
Denton?
Yes. Yeah. And it just so happened that it worked. It worked. Dudo wanted to come. He wanted to come back out. So we basically, Dudo and I just kind of switched. So he came out to MCO. It worked for him personally, professionally. So then I went out to third. But he when I got there, he's like, I want you to be 800-pound gorilla stomping around this battalion. I was like, why? And I'm out there with Kevin. And
like 145, 150 maybe.
Usually I weigh about 130. So, but he says this and I look around.
I was including your boots.
Okay. So I was looking around, I'm out there with Kevin Simmons and Sam Carter and Sean Nickow or whatever, and all these, they're freaking huge, like they're 6 foot tall, and I'm like, so I told him, I was like, Master Guns, I don't think I can be it, and he was like, all right, you can be a velociraptor. And I was like, okay, deal, done, So, but he backed me. He had my back. And there was a bunch of stuff that went on out there that, professionally, like I walked in and he was so honest. I loved it about him that he was so honest. He said, I'm not a nerd for this. He's like, I don't understand, but I know how to employ my capabilities. And I have to say, I'm very much the same way, like I don't get the math behind it. I don't. But
to a certain extent, I mean, ideally you want to, right? But it's not necessary.
Sure.
It's a great to have. It's not a good to have. It's a great to have. But you can get by without it.
I learned it, but I don't fully understand. Like I can't Justin Jensen it. Like that's not, like it just, I don't live the numbers.
That guy, man.
But Paul backed me.
I love me some Trigger.
I'd walk in and I would start, I'd start talking mission or I'd start talking things that were happening. And I'm like, hey, this is what I need, to get down or whatever. And we had a couple conversations that were not happy conversations, because I didn't agree with him or he didn't agree with me, but he always backed me. And I really appreciated that about him. And he gave me the leeway to do what he knew I was capable of doing. And so he told me, he said, I want you to take the OCAC to the next level. And I was like, okay, I will. And I met a lot of resistance doing that. And it was just individuals that didn't understand where we were headed. And it was great because Paul would come in off the ropes and just deliver. I don't know if you've ever experienced a set down from Paul or.
So no, I my only interaction with Paul was when I was assigned to DIA, and there was a little bit of some conflict about it. Mm-hmm. And he kind of pulled me aside and told me straight up. He's like, "You'll be fine." He kind of, because I didn't know who to trust.
Yeah.
In the situation I found myself in, and he quickly identified himself. Hey, come here, and pulled me close and said, look, these are the things you're up against, and here's why. But you got this. You're solid.
Yeah.
I know that, and you'll be fine. Yeah. But I've never seen like an ugly side of him. He's always been like this very quiet, like uncle.
Yeah.
At a family reunion.
Well, but when the Godfathers got to talk to you, it's an uncomfortable thing. Very. Yeah. And we'd call him that because Paul made moves while he was in while he was in and before he retired, but as the Ockfield found, Paul's still making moves. He's in Alabama retired and he's still moving chess pieces, that's just who he is. And I really appreciated that. But he looked down the road, and I loved that it wasn't immediate today. It was what was coming with it. So when I would walk in and say, I want to take these steps to eventually get to this point, Paul was there. He saw the vision. He was like, yeah, let's do it. So I really appreciated that from him.
What do you think he'd say about this interview?
He'd just shake his head.
Yeah.
He'd just shake his head. We call him the Godfather, and he just kind of laugh and shake his head. He knows it, but yeah. So, and I know I could trust Paul. So I really appreciate that about him. But for me personally, the way before him, so Reagan Bradford, Chief Warrant Officer Reagan Bradford, she got promoted to Staff Sergeant. I was still Lance Corporal out at 1st Radio Battalion when it was in Hawaii. And, they said, look around and, in boot camp, they said, look around and find a female Marine that's doing the right thing and model yourself after them. Right. And she was who I found. I was like, she was proficient in her job.
Why female? Why couldn't it just be any Marine?
Because there's a balancing act to this. And so if I do have male mentors, but there's just some things that they're not going to do the same, is not going to be the same. So, and it helps to see somebody else. How they manage that. Yeah. How they've walked that line. Yeah. And she was killing it. So she was proficient. I was in the cage at the time, and she was in the OCA. That was back when the equipment was huge. It was big Suns computers, but she was proficient. She always was squared away in her uniform and stuff like that. I think I ran a PFT with her that I didn't do so great because I had some stuff go wrong or whatever, and I didn't do so hot on the PFT, and it was my first PFT that wasn't a 300. I was pretty tore up over it, but she was out there, and she just she was doing her thing, and she killed it. And so just always kind of watched her, and I was through my whole career, she's kind of been my benchmark, where she's been going, what she's been doing. So it's been nice. I've been able to work with her twice now. So again, from then, twice since then, we were out at 3rd together. And then she's up in DCI staff out here while I'm down at Intel Department. So I can just imagine some female Marine listening to this elsewhere in the world and thinking, holy shit, she ran 300 PFTs. I never ran a 300 PFT. Yeah. I think my highest was a 291 but I was like running ridiculous amount of miles per week. And it's just not been me. High first class, but yeah. Never 300. So, kind of switching it up. How do you stay informed? What do you read? How do you collect your information? Okay. So I do better reading what I'm interested in. Like our job is stressful. There's information overload with our job. So I keep my reading, my reading is my own, so I do that for personal pleasure. That's my escape. So when you read for pleasure, you grab a book, right? Cozy up in the corner, or even then in my news, I read what I want to, what I'm going to enjoy reading. I don't want to read something where I have to stop and think about, is this fake news or not and stuff. I stay away from the political stuff. I don't take that information in because I know that it's coming from a bias. I do better talking story. So, having discussions with those people, my coworkers around me and stuff like that, I'm collecting, I'm an analyst, so collecting pieces of information and sources. But talking it out and listening to other people's opinions and or their perspective, or how did they consume it, and what did they get from it, and then. So in the past, I would say that'd be all right, but right now, like, I'm nervous about I had to shut down some conversations in my workspace somewhat fairly recently, just because it was taking a tangent and bordering on being somewhat unprofessional, and I want to make sure that we maintain a certain amount of decorum in the environment that we work in, because like right now it just seems to me, and this is just Sammy talking, that there's a level of tension and almost like aggression and hostility that's kind of permeating through America. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily see it in Japan. Mm-hmm. And, it's all Marines where I work and play, and the guys that I roll with and all of that. So it's not really there. But when I was home on leave in Texas, you could feel the tension. And then, here hell, when I went up to the Pentagon to go visit with you last week, week before last, I just got into a conversation with
a gentleman and his wife on the subway. They were speaking in Spanish, so I just engaged in Spanish. So it's an opportunity to practice and keep my proficiency up, right, and be proud. And we got to talking, and immediately the conversation switched to the political environment. Individual was Puerto Rican, and very strong opinions about the way in which the government has handled the fallout from the hurricanes that they got slammed with. And I was like, maybe 35 seconds in the conversation, I was like, I want to get off this ride.
With that emotion and then that information that you're getting from them, I mean, in a lot of discussions and arguments and stuff like that, when you put somebody on guard, like you're going to get down to it, right? And they're going to get there quicker because they've got a point to make. And so I think a lot of people sometimes don't even know where they're coming from on their opinion, like they just have this feeling, but when you walk them to it and you make them defend it, okay, defend your position, then they bear it and they give you the information behind it. And some it's emotion. Yeah. I get that, but sometimes that's how you get down to it. But I mean, coming from that's a perfect example, like coming from a Puerto Rican's stance on how Puerto Rico is being treated after this hurricane and stuff like that. Like, yeah, absolutely. Like he's got data, so I don't know. I'm not afraid of that aggression. I'll get in an argument with you.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Let's go.
It's funny that you mentioned that because we were having a conversation. Was it last week before? How you almost you enjoy that.
I don't know about enjoy it, but like I said, like it gets to it.
Right. Not necessarily about the politics, but like about professional differences, like viewing a situation one way and somebody views it differently. There's a productive process that takes place there when you chop it up over the fine bits and the details of what it is that's at the crux of the friction point. Some of our peers don't like that.
Yeah, but you know what? When people are uncomfortable, like I said, they'll get down to what they mean quicker, and you can cut through it. Nobody has time. We don't have time for bullshit.
Right.
I don't have time for people blow smoke. Like, just get to it, and I appreciate that. That's like, I really like, sparring with like Sean Nicol.
Yeah.
There's been, who can talk louder? But I do because Sean gets right to it.
Yeah.
And I like that. I appreciate that about him. And he, and it offends people and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, like he
rubbed me wrong when I first met him. But yeah, I love that guy now.
It's real. It's quick. It's succinct, and it gets shit done. Yeah. And I appreciate that. I cannot stand somebody that just goes in circles around shit and we don't get anything accomplished. Like, you're not talking for talking's sake, let's get some shit done. I don't know. I just appreciate that better and stuff. So, Marine Corps, on the Marine Corps side, keeping up with what's happening in the Marine Corps, being at headquarters, we have to. So email distros, it all comes in over email. You can believe how many emails we get every day. That is just someone just purely information. Most of them just purely information.
How can we do it better? Do you think emails I think emails so outdated. I mean, it's almost like the equivalent of snail mail. Right. When I was in San Antonio, I ran my team with Skype. Mm-hmm. I ran my team leaders and then I had a direct support team. It was kind of like my ops section that I ran with Skype, and I could bring up on camera and VTC with guys that were just on the other side of, so instead of having to get up and walk over there, I could just pull them up real quick, look them in the eye, and then get back to work. Yeah. And didn't do that all the time. I mean, but just if I couldn't get up and walk over there right then and there, I would do that. And we had conversations today in the this week in the data summit about push notifications. It's like, you get an email on Sipper, you get something pushed over to you on JWix if that's where you're logged on. If the system's smart enough to know, hey, she's on Nipper right now, we'll push her. Hey, you need to check another system. or even something as simple as, or controversial as, bring your own device or government furnished equipment to where, that's your laptop, you take it home, or you bring your laptop into the workspace, because when you get down to it, I didn't agree with this initially, but when they broke it down to me, shotgun style, that the data can be authenticated. Yeah. And I mean, we have the technology, we can break through that. I don't know what the answer is, but it just seems to me like email is just the most laborious way to disseminate information.
I would like to see something on our systems that allow for a little more instantaneous conversation. Just enable link,
Yeah.
Just turn it on so we can, that's how information is. We send it in snippets these days, but,
or hyperlinks, right? I mean,
yeah, but you have to wonder too. Like I think about, you think about a lot of the movies that are futuristic movies, and the one I'm going to reference here, and it's kind of funny that I'm referencing it, but the Idiocracy, right? And he's literally sitting in front of the TV, that scene where the casket, is crashing through the guy's apartment wall or whatever, and he's sitting on a toilet TV, whatever. But if you're watching the screens, like if you watch all the screens, like there's just information, there's data just constantly coming at them at all times, and they're kind of like numb to it. And I feel like we can get to that point of saturation, and we've got to be careful of that. Email allows you to go look for it. Granted, you can overlook it and you can ignore it. And it would be nice to have an easier way to communicate too, though. There's no harm in picking up the phone and talking to somebody, because I think over the written word, it's easier to miscommunicate.
Yeah.
A lot, you know? So I think, picking up and having that phone conversation, or getting in front of a VTC and having a face-to-face and, say it. But I also think too, engaging when it's important to engage, and just getting the work done when it's not, you don't need to talk about it. You don't need, just do the work. So, and that was like with the cops, the SIGINT cops and stuff. And they were like, how can we do these better? And they didn't like my answer, which was like, stop having so many cops. Have them when we need them.
Yeah.
Have them when we need to have a discussion and we all need to hear each other discussing it. Have them when we need to push information and they all need to be on the same page and get it, that way. Or when the OC field says, hey, we need a cop, and give them a cop. But stop doing it every quarter, because then it got to, nobody was going. And
by the way, it sucks when I got to come in at like 2, 3, 4 in the morning.
Well, you're the outlier.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but fortunately, the way that I've kind of worked it and massaged it with our leadership is, if I do that, I'll get off early, because I know me. I'll come in at 2 in the morning and I'll ride it out to 1400, 1600 the next day, just because. Well, there's shit that just needs to get done, but there's got to be a balance, right? And
well, you know what they say about shit that needs to get done.
What do they say about shit?
What if you don't do it? It'll still be there. Still need to get done. So you don't have to kill yourself to get it.
So what's the last book that you read for pleasure? You don't want to say? Okay. All right. I've read Blood Meridian 3 times back to back to back. It's rough. Have you read it?
No, I don't. So I don't want it. I don't want things to be my reading is strictly my own. So I read fiction. It's fiction. It's fiction.
It's historical fiction. It's about the Indian scalp trade in Texas in like the 1890s.
Oh, it's intense.
1890s, yeah, somewhere around there. But it talks about the depravity of humanity, and how dark we can get sometimes. But I read it 3 times over, at the recommendation of some good friends, and the book The Road was very important to my relationship with my father towards the end of his life. But the author Cormac McCarthy has also written several other books, and I picked one of his titles up just recently. I've seen the movie, but I wanted to read the book, which is No Country for Old Men. And at the beginning of the movie, Tommy Lee Jones's character says something to the effect of, "I always like listening to the old timers when they talk." Who is it around you that you just like listen to them talk?
I like listening to Mr. Dennis Murphy. The things Murph's always got a story. And he knows so much stuff. Chief Armstrong Mush.
Yeah.
Give him a hard time about it, but he's been in for, well over 30. I mean, he had some broken service, but he's been around.
Right. He was talking about how he had to use graph paper to break out encryption.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's how they trained us.
I still haven't released his, but it's probably going to come out probably tomorrow. Yeah. Tomorrow, the day after. Yeah.
He tells, because he'll listen for a little bit, and then he's like, "Well, you know where that came from, right?" And of course you're like, "No, I don't know where that came from." And then he's like, "Well, here, youngin',"
Yeah.
Yeah. So, which is super helpful. So he's definitely one of those people I go seek out, because he just has it that way. Joe Toscano, because he's just, God, Joe's just entertaining, but he's a nerd, but he's but he's a Cro-Magnon man nerd. It's pretty impressive. But just his stories.
I've heard his name 1,000 times over, but I didn't get to meet him until this past week. Seems like a great guy.
Yeah.
I'd like to get to know him better.
He's guilty of the same thing I'm guilty of, where people tell you, they say, "Oh, you just have a lot of passion. You're very passionate," which, is a good way of saying you're kind of an asshole. So, but without saying, you're an asshole to your face, but Joe gets passionate. But I appreciate that about him, because he gets passionate about some really nerdy stuff, but there's times he'll go off and I'm like, "God, you're such a nerd, Joe," but I really enjoy listening to what he has to say. Yeah, so I like hearing General Henry whenever he has to talk or he's got a point to make, because General Henry just doesn't give an order. He's going to give you why, and he's and you're going to believe by the time he's done talking, and I appreciate that about him.
So he was he did the kickoff right before the O2XX modernization summit and our data summit, and he asked the question, "Why are values important?" Mm-hmm. Towards the end there. It's quiet. And I think I've established that I don't like sitting in the room when there's a general talking and he asks a question, nobody says anything. So I said, because it informs our character, sir. Who said that? It was like, I was in the back sipping on coffee. I walked in late. And I said, "Master Castro, I said, where you at?" And raise my coffee mug. He's like, "Oh, you're unlike your three MEF colleagues, the other three MEF colleagues, you've been here on deck for a little bit, so you're with us this morning." Because the rest of them, I think they were still jet lagged.
Yeah.
But to hear him go back to some of those touchstone points at the initiation of these large scale movements that we're trying to affect, to kind of just remind us, what we're here for, what we're about, and to kind of, touch back to that, I think is very important, and he cautioned the guys at the very beginning of what not to do.
Yeah.
In those environments, and one of the things that he said was to avoid the temptation to disguise realism, or to disguise cynicism as realism. Right? He says there's plenty of opportunity for the cynic in all of us to appear, and it'll be disguised as realism. That's not going to happen because of why can't it happen?
Yeah.
And then the other thing was, for arrogance to be disguised as authoritative knowledge. And then the last one that he cautioned against was callousness, disguised as the thick skin of experience. And that was great, because I hadn't heard it articulated as such at that point in time, right before we got into all the arguing and discussions that we get into.
Yeah.
And so during the week, when I saw that, when I saw those instances where what he was talking about, what he had cautioned us against, started to rear its head, and I was able to call it out. Oh, that's callousness, that's arrogance, and that's cynicism. Yeah.
Yeah. He had a PME last year where he had I department, MCIA, all of us down there, and he told us, he said, we are them, they are us. It's just the way it is. And it was no longer, it wasn't like, us up here pitting ourselves against, the rest of the community. He's like, we're all the same thing. But it was a very, Dad spoke. You definitely,
right.
You could see it, and in the room, there was a lot of chastised looks going, just individuals that were guilty of it. But he had that PME where he basically stripped it down. He's like, we're all the same. The McKisery is a thing. It's happening. You're part of it. We are all part of it. So just get over it and get to work,
The big we, the royal we.
Yeah.
So General stands before his staff, and he has some items in front of him. He wordlessly picks up a very large and empty mayonnaise jar and proceeds to fill it with golf balls. He then asks the Marines around him if the jar was full, and they agreed that it was. He then picks up a box of pebbles and pours them into the jar. He shakes the jar lightly. The pebbles roll into the open areas between the golf balls. He then asks the Marines again if the jar was full, and of course, they agreed it was. Then the general picks up a box of sand and pours it into the jar. And of course, the sand filled up everything else. And he asked once more if the jar was full, and the Marines responded with a unanimous yes. He then produces 2 cups of coffee from under the table and poured the entire contents into the jar, effectively filling the empty space between the sand. And the Marines laughed. Now, said the general, as the laughter subsided, I want you to recognize that this jar represents your life. The golf balls are the important things, your family, your children, your health, your friends, and your favorite passions. And if everything else was lost and only they remained, your life would still be full. The pebbles are the other things that matter, like your job, your house, your car. And the sand is everything else, the small stuff. If you put the sand into the jar first, he continued, there's no room for the pebbles or the golf balls. And the same goes for life. If you spend all your time and energy on the small stuff, you'll never have room for the things that are important to you. Pay attention to the things that are critical to your happiness. Play with your children. Take time to get medical checkups. Take your spouse out to dinner. Play another 18 holes. There'll always be time to clean the house and fix the disposal. Take care of the golf balls first, the things that really matter. Set your priorities. The rest is just sand. And one of the Marines raised his hand and inquired what the coffee represented. And the general smiled. I'm glad you asked. It just goes to show you that no matter how full your life may seem, there's always room for a couple of cups of coffee with a friend. Now, I kind of changed that up because when General Henry released this, it was a professor and his students. Mm-hmm. But as the story was given to me, it came from General Henry.
It's in his playbook.
Yeah, it's in his playbook. And I wanted to read it out loud prior to asking you this question for others to hear. Mm-hmm. Because not everybody's seen his playbook. What are your golf balls, Sarah?
My family.
Well, yeah.
But not just my family here, my family everywhere. And really, that's it. They're my golf balls, all of them.
What about your photography?
Well, that's a pebble.
Is it?
Yeah. Yeah.
You seem to be passionate about it.
Well, yeah, I enjoy it. It's something, it's the art that I want to create and how I'm going to earn my living when I get out of the Marine Corps. But
So, sounds like a golf ball to me.
but it's not.
Not yet.
It's not so important that I need to. No, it's just not. I mean, because the way that everything has been set up, we retire, we're not going to have to work if we don't want to. So it's going to be that job that I love doing. It's going to be that hobby that I love doing, and I'm going to get paid to do it.
Favorite passion? Maybe not.
Yeah, I don't know.
You're a hell of a photographer.
Well, thank you.
The photos that I can always tell when you took the photo, it's got a distinct characteristic to it, and all the photos that you have of your children in your office, I could tell you took them.
Yeah.
I'm still working on my photography skills, and the medium that I've been practicing most on is my training partners and the kids practicing jiu-jitsu. It's hard though because they move so fast and it's so dynamic, and I took when I was at DIA, they gave me like a pretty decent class or period of instruction, extended period of instruction, and the instructors for that segment allowed us to keep coming back and perfecting our craft. And so I know about f-stop and shutter speed and all of that, but most recently I got a nifty 50, like f-stop 1.8, and that's what I use, but there's no zoom on it because it's a fixed lens, a prime lens, and so I've got to be the focus and get in and out, and because it's on the mats, I'm usually wearing a gi. There's no issue with that, and it makes it more a very visceral, physical endeavor. But it's a lot of fun. But having to adjust the ISO and the shutter speed, especially because where we are mostly when we're practicing, there's some windows. So there's some light that comes in, but there's also the artificial light up top. And depending on which side of the mat I'm taking pictures on, I got to be careful of what I'm shooting. But it's a great hobby.
But you can always correct underexposure, but not overexposure. And just remember, if you get it in frame, you can edit it later. So just get it in frame.
and that's usually been my approach. But I've tried my best to stay off of the presets, right, and just go to manual, and stay there, right. It's kind of like jiu-jitsu. Like if you're bad on your back, you need to be on your back so that you can get better at it. So that's what I've been doing. But Liz got a chance to take some photography classes out there in Okinawa. There's a professional photographer that teaches photography to the community out there, and then he'll take you to different key spots and you can take some photos. But most recently, Liz scheduled out a photo shoot at night at this one particular point on the coastline with a National Geographic photographer, and got to talking to him and how he sets everything up and the long exposure. And you got to be really, really still, or else the photos come out extremely awkward. But he was able to get some decent snapshots. But photography is one of those things that you got to be really patient with, and really kind of refine your craft. But
just be prepared to take a lot of sucky pictures.
Yeah. So I think I'm at about maybe a 2 to 3% use rate of what I actually capture. And then that's normal though. But if you think of it going from like the film days to now the digital days and stuff like that, like digital photography redefined photography. So they've actually, I read this interesting, just something that I wanted to read in the news, but they were talking how history is potentially being lost because we're deleting it. Interesting.
Because we're not taking those pictures. So the example that they used was Monica Lewinsky being hugged by Bill Clinton when he was voted in as the president. At one of his rallies or whatever, she hugged him. Okay. And they were talking about how that picture now, go years later on down in his presidency, and she's kind of an important person, But it was interesting that picture, had it been in the digital age, could have been lost. But at the time, that was still very much a film point in history. So you delete a lot of stuff that you don't realize. But when you're taking a picture so if you're taking it for the art aspect of the picture, or if you're taking it for an information aspect, so there's that part of photography as well. Like why are you taking it? But yeah, sports photography, that's no joke. The National Geographic photographers, some of the stuff they go through, that was what I wanted to do. For a long time, I was going to be a National Geographic photographer. And then I was reading a photographer, somebody that had shot for National Geographic, but did a lot of wildlife stuff, photography. Wrote a small book. It wasn't very long, but man, the stuff that guy went through, I was like, yeah, I changed my mind.
There's this one couple, Derek and Beverly Joubert. They do the National Geographic documentaries in Africa, and they do a lot of stuff on lions, and he's the cinematographer and she's the still photographer. Mm-hmm. I think they also paint and do some other stuff too, but it's just a couple that they've lived out there for years in the African savannah and have gotten to capture and tell the stories of these magnificent animals. Usually, if it's a very well done National Geographic documentary about lions, it's probably them two that produced it. But she's got an amazing eye, and the way in which he crafts the tale really kind of sucks you in. They did the one about the lions versus the hyenas a while back, and there's there's some beautiful moments, grisly and visceral moments, but beautiful in the fact that that's the life. Obviously, I'm not capturing anything as dynamic as that, but man, watching the kids roll and just like, especially when they're doing their the drills for the techniques that they just learned, and you can capture those moments where these two girls or these two kids, two boys, who have trained for hours with one another, and they become friends on and off the mat, just kind of giggling and laughing and just enjoying the moment. Those are the cool shots that I prefer the most. That's what
so when I joined the Marine Corps, that's what I asked. I wanted to be an in-combat photographer. But there were no, I don't know how much from the recruiter. Because I know that I've never been a recruiter, but I know that there's, different like categories they put us in and stuff like that. And in any case, so the Marine recruiter let me retake the ASVAB. And I doubled my score. So I was like, let me take it for real this time. But it was on a computer, so I couldn't fill in the bubbles again. But I scored high enough to be, in this field. But he said there was no spots open or anything, for me to go be an in-combat photographer. But he told me I could move after. So what he didn't know, because he was motor T, was that no, you don't move from SIGINT to, in combat photographer. Right. Like that doesn't happen. So I never got to do it. I never got to move over and do that. But that's actually the job I wanted to do in the Marine Corps. So but SIGINT is very much in photography. They're right there in the spectrum with each other. So being a SIGINTer actually has helped me in my photography, because it's simply capturing light, same. You're just capturing a signal. I'm just using a different piece of equipment to do it. Yeah. So
Liz has a great, and I can't remember it completely off the top of my head, but the classes she took, the instructor gave her an analogy about filling up a bathtub with water, and it's how you do it. I have to ask her to remind me of exactly how he described it, but essentially, you're capturing light. What do you shoot with?
So I have a Canon. I initially had a Sony Alpha, which where I was at in the world, you couldn't get a lot of Sony. I couldn't get lenses for it. I couldn't get parts for it. My analog.
Where were you out in the world?
So I was at San Angelo.
Okay.
My Sony, I couldn't get anything for it. I could order things, but I didn't trust it. I wanted touch it, and so they didn't have a lot of photography stores and stuff out there or whatever. And you could order offline, but again, I couldn't touch it. I didn't know exactly what I needed. So I needed to go in and talk to somebody, but, so I went away from my Sony Alpha, which I never should have done, but I traded it in for a Canon. But now everything's gone mirrorless. So I still have mine is still a digital SLR, but mine has mirrors. But the mirrorless have come out and they're getting better and better and better. So I've told myself I will not buy another big body until I'm setting up for my business. I'm just not going to spend that money because by the time I do that.
What do you think the flagship model is that you're going to go with? Is it going to be a Canon because you've already got the class?
No, I think I'm going to go ahead and go with Olympus. I've been reading a lot on that's mostly what I read. So where technology is with photography, which isn't too far from.
I figured I'd get at it eventually.
So the Olympus. It was one of the first models to go mirrorless, and so they've been perfecting it longer. But Olympus didn't sell out like a lot of the others did. So I have a Fuji. I have a Fuji, but mine's old school. It was made in Japan before Japan sold it to Taiwan. So I still have my Fuji, but that's my film. That's my camera that still takes film.
Okay. Yeah. So I bought Liz a Canon Rebel T2i years ago. I can't, maybe in 2008 timeframe was when it came out. And that's what we'd been using up until I just recently bought her a T7i. I didn't think she needed anything more robust than that because we're still kind of like prosumers, I guess. A
lot of people assume the equipment's what matter. There's this one individual that I follow. I follow his blog, and he literally goes around to like yard sales and thrift stores, and he buys just any old camera. So even those old like point and shoots, like the first digital ones that came out. Right. And then he pushes them. He pushes the settings. He pushes them into situations where like they wouldn't normally be successful. Right. And he produces some pretty fantastic photography off of it. But his whole thing is it's about being technically proficient. And so that's where I've been that's why I haven't graduated bodies. I got a Canon simply so I could push into other lenses, but I could get my hands on them. I could walk into a store. I could talk to, the reps and stuff, Best Buy sells them. Right. But I could get my hand on the lens. And so that's why I pushed to Canon. And it was from the Sony, Canon is the closest as far as like setup on it. Cause I was very used to handling where the shutter was and everything on the Sony. So Canon was the closest. Nikon is like the exact opposite. Yeah. So if the dial turns right to do something on the Canon, it turns left on the Nikon. So I just didn't want to have to go that far to try to learn the new camera. So,
I've read a lot of good things about the Sonys. And I think it was you that mentioned it to me, a while back, and I thought about crossing over, but we just recently picked up some extra glass from out there in Oki, and then we bought that nifty 50, and I love that lens. You got to be a little bit more physical with it, but I'm okay with that. Yeah. Just because of the fact that you're engaged with the subject that you're trying to capture. So. What do you listen to?
Music-wise, or?
Yeah.
Just about everything, as long as I can feel it.
What's like your go-to playlist? Me and John Stansel were talking last night about playlists, and he doesn't subscribe to a music service. He's still doing the oldies, but like oldies that were like 50s, 60s, 70s, oldies. One of the things that you mentioned that you wanted to touch back on was how have things changed from an integration standpoint since when we came in? I remember, I had females on my SSTs for field X's. Mm-hmm. And when I was getting ready to fly out to Port-au-Prince, Haiti for Operation Secure Tomorrow around 2003, 2004 timeframe, Megan Wood was on my team, and they pulled her off at the last minute. And I was pissed. I probably shouldn't have, but I did express to her my frustration, and that I fought to keep her on the team, and she's. I think she kind of downplayed it. She's like, "It's not a big deal, you know. It was probably too good to be true anyway." But I was thinking, man, you know what? It'll be awesome because I can get anything I want from the grunts.
She's your acquisition officer?
Well, not. I mean, she was going to be on my team, carrying a weapon and everything. But if I needed her to do something, or even just to interact with, because I was kind of planning out, you know, we were going to be on the streets of Port-au-Prince.
Yeah.
And I'd never been there before, but what I knew of it, there's some rough neighborhoods, and she would have a better job or have an easier go at interaction with some of the local community members than I would, because they wouldn't see her as a threat.
Yeah. Not
necessarily, but that option was negated right off the jump. But and you know, the over time it looked as though the females were only going to be allowed to operate in the OCEs and the OCACs.
Yep. Is
it still that way?
So when I came in, pre 9/11, that's exactly how it was. You could only, like, that's the only way you were going to go, is you were going to go be an analyst. But they wouldn't send you until your second enlistment at that point in time, because it had to be an incentive type thing.
So what is the female Signet Marine first termer do?
So I got to teach the male Marines how to do their job. It was epic. Took care of the gear. I worked in the cage. Clerk. Oh, the clerk jobs. Really good at clerking. Fast hands at the typewriter, I guess, or whatever, you know. But yeah, so that was always kind of the joke too. You know, if you were a good looking female, you're going to go work in the company office. That was always said. And it was always just kind of like, damn it, you know. But that's what I did pretty much my first term. Got really proficient with the equipment and with the gear, and then went into the cage and took care of it that way. Organized the cage. So that was the other big thing. They had come back from going to the initial push-in, come back. The gear was a mess. Records, we couldn't find the record jackets to go with the gear. Stuff needed to be inducted. I mean, whole TAMs had to go in because they were just wrecked. And so we had to do that quickly because we had to turn around and do that double pump because first and third were splitting. Right. So second had to cover down on that. So we had to turn around and get everything fixed.
America's rampant.
We had to get everything fixed. We had to get it back. We had to get the numbers right. The teams had to get outfitted and we needed to train. And then we had to keep it maintained while they were training. So that's what did the first enlistment. So second enlistment, you know, I was getting sergeant, heading to staff sergeant ranks, but I was up at Marfor PAC. So I was already in a staff position, so I didn't really have an issue there. I did go out IA from there, and that presented some challenges. I got into Iraq. I checked in with an Army Sergeant Major because I was with MNFI. So I was with the all the IAs just filling out there. So
Multinational Forces Iraq.
Yeah, and I was going to go on a MIT team. But
I was saying it out loud because there's people who are not going to know what MNFI.
Okay, Google it. But anyways, so I felt like it was very. I thought it was kind of funny that I had to go check in at the Perfume Palace, which was where it was rumored that was where Uday and Qusay kept their harem, right? Wow. So I had to go check in at the Perfume Palace and convince this Army Sergeant Major to actually let me go out on the MIT that I was supposed to go on, because he was going to keep me there at the Perfume Palace, which you start looking around and I was like, I don't want to be here, because there were just females, all services, just working, I mean, everywhere. Now, I mean, the jobs were important and it's not that they weren't, but that's not what I was billeted to do. That's not what I had worked up to go do. So I was pretty frustrated. Luckily, one of the 0269. I'm sorry, 0291. Swooped in and saved me. Because he was like, she's a Marine. I billet her. You don't get a billet. Like, he went sideways at the sergeant major and like, nope, I'm taking her. She's going to go on the MIT team. I could hear him through the door. And he come out and he's like, you're coming with me. And I was like, oh, thank God. So I got to go out on the MIT, and that was cool. I was the only female American. Actually, I was the only female most times on the Iraqi side of base working on the MIT. I was safe. The male Marines weren't. So that was unique. I felt more comfortable on the Iraq side of base than I did on the American side. But so that was, I was glad that I got to do that. And I'm glad I didn't get stuck at the Perfume Palace. And then after that, I went to the schoolhouse where, none of that mattered, whatever. Got to redo the MARC course, kind of push the bar on that, kind of make the other courses look around at themselves. And you came on deck and did what you did with the Spanish course, which made the other courses that were way out of date look really bad. So that was good. And then, but we had some uniqueness occur there too, because we were getting the students from DLI. Right. And the DLI command was having some trouble at that time. And so they were coming to us, and we were kind of having to try and fix some of the damage that had been done by leadership there that had just lost, the Marines had lost trust and confidence with them. And so we kind of had to repair that. Like, the whole staff had to. And so that was, and it was interesting too, because we have the firefighter schoolhouse there. So that was a unique perspective, for them out there. For those that were out there at that time, we had, we called it the female PME, but it was open to anybody. But it was trying to get at some of the stuff that had happened out at DLI.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Strange. How tidbits of conversations can strike open those memory floodgates. At a certain point in your career, do you have to start being able to identify who's safe?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Right away.
What if have you ever gotten it wrong?
Yes. And you learn, and it's an unfortunate lesson. It's a hard lesson, and you don't want to forgive yourself from having to learn it. And in some cases, it's really damaging. So
let's switch it up a little bit. If not for the Marines, where would Sara be?
Gosh, I probably would have had to go home, worked and saved. Probably went to the local community college, knocked out the basic stuff. I don't know, taking student loans, maybe. Maybe went to Seattle before it got really expensive to live there. Went to the Art Institute. There was other art institutes opening up, so I may have ended up somewhere else, but a bigger city somewhere where one of those were at. So, I don't know. I'd like to think that I'd be doing art somewhere, maybe doing the photography. Maybe I would have went and done the National Geographic stuff. If the Marine Corps hadn't soured me on going to the field. It's cold, it's wet. I don't want to be cold and wet anymore. So, no, but I don't know. Yeah, probably that.
Okay. So, know yourself, seek self-improvement. What do you suck at?
Oh, remember that earlier I mentioned that passionate thing? Yeah. Yeah, I get, sometimes I suck at, they say stuff like, let it go. Yeah. My favorite one that I love this because my sarcastic response back is like, exactly how do you do that? Which is, don't worry about it. Like, oh really? Is that a switch somewhere, the don't worry about it switch? Because if I could just flip that switch, that'd be fucking great. But meanwhile, what? I care too much sometimes about things that don't deserve the passion,
This is a hill you're going to die on. So I remember not long after I arrived in Oki, and you and I had been in touch and in contact about some of the lines of effort where we needed to connect and work on some things to address some issues between MEF and RABBIN. And I had been in touch somewhat recently prior to that with the deputy G2 at Mar4 PAC, Mr. Stephen Manning. and I shared with you the context of our conversation about Sara Clark. And you're like, no way, he didn't say that. I was like, yes. I mean, he's got a high opinion of you. And what he did say was that sometimes you can be a bit pedantic, meaning that if somebody says something that's even like maybe half true or just not 100% completely correct, you'll be quick to point that out. And I have noticed that in you over the years, but he did mention that there is that aspect about you that you will die on that hill. like this is my hill and I'm going to stand here.
Right.
But where did you develop that?
So I was always a debater. I mean, even as a kid, when I was like the 4th and 5th and 6th grade, I told everybody that I was going to be the first female president, which I still have a chance. No. But I was going to be. I've always been. So the hard thing is this is going to sound so like, yay me, but I have a good memory. I remember things well. And if I've read it or I've seen it and even especially if I've done it, that I remember very well. So in school was not rough because it's really just memorize it, test it, you're good, right?
Yeah.
And so that's hard for me because I do remember things well. And so when people, like quote things and I'm like, no, that's not what it says. So to be fair, to characterize, conversations, those conversations where that's why I was kind of surprised that he said that, because we locked horns hard over people who were telling me they were the authority of something and yet couldn't tell, they didn't have the doctrine down. So,
right.
I definitely was like, hey, no. And it was legal issues. There were legal things there. And I wanted to do it right. And doing it right required work. And that's where everybody was kind of digging in their heels with me. And I'm like, no, it's the right thing is to do this work. So, but yeah, that's where it comes from. I just remember stuff. And so
Yeah, I remember you were talking to me about the fact that you were just ready to be a mom.
Yes.
And I don't think anyone can begrudge you that. But I do remember explicitly telling you that you needed to stick around, that you'd be a hell of a master guns, and that Mr. Manning and I agreed on that same fact. Despite the fact that you guys had locked horns. And I don't think I ever saw the wrong side of Sara Clark. I don't, no.
You're a doer, and I like doers. Like you just get shit done. I appreciate that.
But yeah, I don't think we've ever had a heated disagreement. We may have argued a point or two, but never came at each other sideways like that. But you had with him, and that didn't change his opinion of you. I think more than anything, he probably enjoyed that, knowing him, and it caught his attention. And like I said, he thought that you'd make a hell of a master guns, and here you are.
Yeah.
Right. So, what did you think when you first heard that Sammy Castro's doing a podcast? Which isn't my podcast, by the way. It's the Ockville's podcast. I've said that time and again.
No, I thought it was interesting, and I was kind of like, what? And so that the first one I listened to was Kevin's, of course. And I liked it. I liked listening to, knowing Kevin. And I even told him this, like I was waiting for his little his little Easter eggs, the things that Kevin does. And so he did not disappoint. So
what are some of these Easter eggs?
Some of the way he tells stories and like names he'll give, Lance Corporal Belt Buckle and stuff, but he's so much more colorful. He's so much more colorful. And he's definitely going to say at least something inappropriate. And so I was waiting for it,
Yeah.
And it's funny though. He's not malicious. He's just, so I was entertained definitely, but I liked, especially the format that allowed Kevin to deliver what he delivered. That's because I had heard that from Kevin. And I appreciated that. And there was so many Marines that I was like, man, if they could just hear him say this. Now I know people have to learn themselves, like there's those people like, nope, just got to stick my hand on the stove, see if it's hot myself, but like Kevin had such a great, way of explaining, what he learned and how he unfortunately had to learn it. And it actually helped me through some stuff too, personally and stuff. We'd sit and talk and, he came from a place of experience and I appreciated that about him. So I was really glad to hear him get that into a podcast that can be listened to over and over again and accessed by a bunch of different people that didn't maybe have a chance to sit for hours and talk to him like I have,
Right.
So.
Yeah, so I've gotten a lot of feedback about his episode, and of course, he loves it whenever his name is mentioned in anybody else's podcast episode. But truth be told, Kevin's episode is the one that has the highest percentage of listened. It's over 100%. Mm-hmm. So that means that if somebody listens to it maybe halfway through, somebody else is picking up the slack.
Yeah.
And I've had some of those Marines reach out to me independently and directly and telling me that hearing him mm-hmm. saved his marriage or saved her marriage or had a direct impact on their personal well-being, their family readiness.
Yeah.
Especially in the middle of some trying situations and circumstances. And, that kind of woke me up to the fact that I'm probably doing more with this than I realize.
Well, and then John Scoggins talking about, like that man humbling himself, to the point that he humbled it and then expressing it like,
right.
Wow, like that's huge. That's big stuff right there. I don't know that I have anything that cool, but like, listening to those two, like definitely. And then Derry, Derry's so accessible. And if you don't know Derry, like what a great format to get to know him,
Yeah.
And he's the guardian of the Ockfield right now. He's going to carry on what John started and put into place. And Derry's going to push it further and take it farther. And Derry's, he's fantastic. He's just great to work with.
But it kind of gave me a pit in my stomach when I got a text message from John saying that, like, listening to Jerry put him over the edge and making sure that he was the one that replaced him. And I was just like, whoa.
Yeah.
Because that's not what I intended. And I knew from talking to Jerry and Joyce that they weren't really looking forward to a headquarters tour. But, at a certain point in time, when you play this game at this level, it's not about what I want anymore.
Yeah.
It's about what we need.
Sam. It's not about what you want anymore, but maybe that you're the person to go do the job. I don't know.
You mean an Okie?
Right.
Right?
Or be the next one to go into DCI staff. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
There's a headquarters job waiting for you.
I've heard that several times, and you're not the only one to bring that up. Eric Bakewell and I were talking, and he's like, hey, but, it might be time to spread some of that Sammy Castro love around. And I was like, man, don't say that. I'm loving life on the Rock. I'll die on that hill.
But you haven't had any place where so to change it up a little bit, where have you gone that you haven't changed it, where you haven't engaged? Like, is there a tour that you have done where you have not Sam Castro'd your tour, because you and Liz make a home everywhere you go. You make a family everywhere you go. You've pushed you're one of those ones, like you're gonna push it, you're gonna run it, but you're gonna take everybody with you. And I don't know anywhere that you've done where anybody's been like, man, Sam, he's such a slacker. Like I don't know anybody that said that about you or that you've punted a tour at all.
The DIA tour was tough on me because I went through 4 STO DATs in less than 3 years. And I got, in that environment, I was a senior enlisted advisor, and I got tight with some of those lieutenant colonels. Mm-hmm. Some of them I got tighter with them than I probably should have. And I didn't get accomplished what I wanted. I mean, I was negotiating sodas and so probably not. Yeah. I mean.
So if you come up here and you do a headquarters tour, like especially right now where everything we're in the change. We are in the grinding of the gears of change, and it's rough. It is hard. I mean, from day to day, stuff's shifting. People say things, they write things down. Stuff gets signed. Stuff gets, pulled back, redone. Stuff gets reassigned. It changes day to day. And I know the Ock field feels like there's a lot of flux coming from headquarters because there is a lot of flux coming from headquarters. And it's not just the Marine Corps. I mean, all the services are in flux right now. The whole DOD is doing it. So, I mean, why not?
Why not? Yeah.
Don't you have a professional responsibility to kind of do that?
You're not supposed to be arm-barring me with my own arguments. Okay. So you got 2 beautiful sons. Mm-hmm. What happens when they come to you and say, Mommy, I want to join the Marines?
So we play why 5 times. Why? So we've been very careful about not wanting to make our service seem like it's a legacy thing. This isn't a heritage, there's no expectation of, any of our family following in these footsteps. We had our own reasons for joining, and they were ours alone. Right. So my sons come to me and say, I want to join. I say, no. But because that's mom,
Right.
Like it's going to be different coming from dad, but mom does what my mom did. And I say, no. Right. And I say no because I've seen a decade and a half of conflict.
If you make him cut his hair, I'm going to come back and find you.
But I've seen that, and I've seen, and they're going to do what they're going to do, and I'll support whatever it is. They're, if that day came, I'd support it. But from mom's perspective, no. I would never want one of my children to be, right now, my oldest little boy says he wants to be a firefighter. That makes my stomach drop to my feet. He's 6,
right.
So, yeah. And that should change a billion times before he, goes out and decides what it is he wants to be when he grows up.
Do you listen to any podcasts?
Just these.
I
used to do, there was some progressive relaxation ones and stuff like that I would just try to listen to on the way home, especially when I was up in the MCO, and you have that commute. And I'd spend an hour in traffic. So I would listen to some meditation stuff, where they kind of talk you through, don't worry about it. That's where that switches.
Right.
So,
Kevin had a funny little Easter egg he used to use in referencing MCO about the difference between disciples and heretics. Which are you?
I'm a heretic.
Yeah.
All the way.
Yeah.
Here's the thing though. So you don't realize, and I realize this, being up at headquarters and stuff, but I've seen this happen a lot, especially having the experience up at the MAR 4. And I recommend, if Marines are asking me where to go next, go to a higher headquarter. Don't stay tactical your whole career. You're doing yourself no service. Because even if you want to be that master guns when you go back to the unit, if you don't have that higher headquarter of understanding of how this all works, you cannot sit that seat. You cannot do it justice. You just can't. You have to see, what goes into it. You have to zoom out, get the bigger picture, get up at that macro level. But, knowing what goes up behind, what goes on behind closed doors up there. I hear, what people say, and I hear, the snarky comments made about headquarters and stuff like that. And the reality is each one of those humans is up there doing that job. They're trying to get to success just the same as everybody else, know, and they want success. Now there's differencing opinions on how that gets done. And maybe, you don't hear the full understanding of what was said and stuff, but every time that phone rang up there, the very first thing it was, how do we get to yes? How do we make this happen?
Right.
Now, a lot of times, we couldn't make it happen, but, and I still think that's what's happening today, but definitely heretic is if I don't like the way things are going, or if it's disorganized or discombobulated, let's fix it.
Right.
That's a lot of work. Okay, cool. I'll do the work. So.
Are you going to listen to this episode?
No.
You're going to have to.
I will.
In order to tell me what you want me to redact and what you want me to keep.
Oh, I'll listen to it like nails on a chalkboard.
Who do you think you'll forward it to first?
I don't know. So I'm not a big self promoter, so I don't know, maybe my mom.
Yeah.
After I teach her how to listen to it.
So, there's some education with that. Yeah.
But explain to her how to listen to it. Maybe my mom.
So of the episodes that you have listened to, were there any questions you think that I should have asked that I didn't? Is there something you'd like to see more of as I get future guests?
I think one of the biggest questions that I always get asked by junior Marines, and I think something that always, like, if they could hear it from like several different aspects and stuff, is what's the keys to your success?
Right.
Those types of questions. So like, how do you know that? Where did you learn that? Because I also feel like in our staff and CO ranks, because of the way we have promoted, because we have been at war, and what has been happening in the Corps has been happening, and what's been happening in the world has been happening. I think a lot of them promoted before they could gain the experience they needed. And so I think maybe they feel like there's a delta there. And so they're looking for ways without embarrassing themselves they could get to that information.
Right.
And I think listening to these podcasts is definitely a way to kind of get to some of that information on, how do I map my road, my career. I'm really curious though, with that, with the way that the retirement has changed for DoD, that I'm curious to see what leaders that produces, Yeah,
it's going to be interesting.
Who hangs out for 30?
I don't think anybody will. I mean, what's the incentive?
Yeah, but you have to. So then what, and do they just deny retirement packages? Do they just say no? Do they just keep you and they can't? So then what? Where do we get those? Where do we get those experienced leaders with what they've done, and then changing the benefits? And especially as smart as these Marines are, and the ones that are coming too are just as capable and even more so. And technology pushes into 5G and beyond, and we start doing this. Now what? Those kids can go make money at industry. Yeah. They can hire as contractors, and they can still serve their government, their country. But they could hire on being the smart solution, getting paid a whole heck of a lot more and benefits than what the military can offer.
Right. And
it's the same with like cyber. They keep saying we need to build this cyber OC field or whatever. No, we need a cyber force. We need a force, a branch of the military that's different. They can't be us. I don't care if they run 3 miles. Nobody gives a crap if they can do pull-ups. The vending machines need to be stocked with Cheetos and high C, and they need to be able to sit in dark rooms with bean bags and do scary crap to scary people, and their promotions need to be different. They need to be judged differently, based off ability. And we've got to stop joking ourselves that, they're going to be a rifleman.
Yeah, I think you've just about got me convinced on that. But of course, we're not the decision makers on that regard. I think, just like with,
aren't we? Isn't that what a senior enlisted's job is to influence the decision maker?
We can definitely influence it. But it's going to be an uphill battle. We're going to have to chip through is the sacred cow of the organizational culture, and every Marine a rifleman, and we know better.
But that's why we have to have a service,
right?
A cyber service.
Yeah.
So they don't have to try and live up to the institutional. I saw so many Marines in my career because of an injury. I have to give up, this signature can't stay, you know? And I get the Marine Corps culture and I understand, but was that the right thing? You know, we lost that expertise. We spent all that time, money, effort training this individual. And some of these guys are just, they come in and we're just teaching them how to speak military. They
Right.
have this they have this.
Yeah.
And then we just lose them. And we didn't look at anything else. So they keep saying we need these cyber guys and stuff like that. Okay, so how about some of these kids that can't do these things? Some of these Marines, some of these soldiers, airmen, Navy, that have to get on these permanent profiles. How about we say, hey, we transition you over, we don't lose you. We transition you over to a cyber force.
The Geek Squad.
Yeah. Why don't we get a solution that gives us what we need?
It's a good question.
And then we draw the kids. We don't have to try to recruit them into. We don't have to sell the Marine Corps to individuals that's not what they're here for. You know, they get sold on the idea of being a cyber ninja, and then the reality of the rest of it hits. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a Staff Sergeant Kessner up with us at 3MEF, and he was a little bit frustrated about the nature of his billet.
Yeah. And they don't want to leave cyber, and I don't blame them. You know, they go up there and they start doing this very technical job, and they get that training's no joke. Yeah. You know, or in these other OC fields, they're saying, how can I get there? You know, and they're having to try and navigate something that's not really clear on how to get there. And you've got everybody trying to understand something they don't understand. So they think they can talk to whether or not this individual would be good in a cyber, but they don't know because they don't know what it takes to do that job. Yeah. But if you had a force that understood that, they could recruit exactly who they need.
Yeah. So, who should I get next?
If she wasn't deploying so soon, I'd say Michelle Brooks, Gunny Brooks.
I don't think I know her.
So she's interesting because she did an internship up at NSA, but she focused mostly on collection management, which is an Achilles heel, you know? So she's fantastic. And she does everything. She's proficient at everything. She's just pretty amazing.
Anybody else?
Chief Warrant Officer Bradford, Reagan. Should definitely talk to Reagan. So Reagan she has prior service in the Air Force.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, right? You know, like that's... Yeah. She comes from a unique place. Also, too, you know, she's Chief Warrant Officer 4. She's kind of a unicorn. Yeah. So, Jen Coco, Chief Warrant Officer Coco. So she came over from Air Crew. So she came from a pretty interesting place. Lat moved into Arabic. You know, and I wouldn't say it's for the bonus, but they had a really sick bonus. So, no, she's very proficient, but she's got a very unique perspective. Let's see. I'm trying to think who else. You kind of got the A team already. You hit pretty good on the rosters.
Well, a lot of that is placement and access.
Yeah. Did you get Chief Warrant Officer Cruz? I don't think I saw one for Alex.
No, I haven't gotten him.
I have to say, he is probably one of the most positive individuals to work with. I really enjoyed working with him. Even when some crap would be Mr. Manning and I'd be locking horns and just, he still was like positive. You know, he brings a real unique. I grew up with him, went to A school with him, so.
How would you characterize your approach to leadership?
I'm a persuasive leader. I know that about myself. I'm uncomfortable being authoritative. And I don't think it's well received. I think it just makes me a bitch, right? So, I've been accused of mothering my Marines, and
I can confirm that you're extremely persuasive. Do you remember a certain point in time where you convinced me that it was in my best interest to accompany you in a conversation with a certain gunnery sergeant who needed to be not necessarily. They just needed to be. We needed to have a conversation with him about how he handled his anger
Oh, yeah.
And then he proceeded to like start kicking things like a child. And I knew from then, like before, when you first came to it, was like, this is not going to play out well. Mm-hmm. And you talked me into it anyway, and it did not play well.
Still had to be done.
It still had to be done. Yeah. I think the individual said something like, I think he accused us of ambushing him, and I was like, if this was an ambush, there'd be blood. There'd be blood.
Right. There would be more of us too.
Yeah, and then he started destroying things.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was pretty persuasive of you.
Well, I'm also, like I said earlier, I'd been accused of mothering my Marines, and trying to mother those around me. I'm okay with that, and I think that's a big part of it. When I was at SEPME, the Master Guns, so the integration, they were doing all the testing for the integration, right? And they had the female Marines had to volunteer. So I think a lot of people don't know that about that testing. All of those women that went out there and did that, they all volunteered to do it, knowing full well that it could injure them, it could destroy their career, it could finish them right there, right? Each one of them did it for their own reasons. But the Master Guns there, he made a comment about humanity, being human with your Marines and stuff. And he said that was one of his strong suits, was that he took care of his Marines, like whenever he'd walk by and say, how are you? And the Marine, would answer, I'm okay. Then he'd stop and say, okay, why are you okay? And most of the time he'd surprise the Marines because, they say, how are you? Okay, great. And keep walking. Right.
Right.
But he said that was one of the big things that he, that resonated with me. It was that caring piece. Even the ones that I climb all over and I'm angry at, or for whatever reasons, it's coming from a place of like, hey, I want you to get right, So I mother my Marines, and I'm all right with that.
Why did you stay enlisted? Why didn't you pursue a commission or go the chief warrant officer route? Especially if like 2 of the 3 people you mentioned, 3 of the 4 people that you mentioned, I should interview next are all chief warrant officers.
So I think every fit rep I have written says that I should, up until finally I think they gave up when as a master sergeant, I was like, not going to happen. I am not PC enough to be an officer. I can't play the political. I don't do well at it. I didn't want to have to start over again. And I also felt like if you look at all those traits that they were looking at and saying, hey, you need to go get a commission, you need to become an officer. If you look at all those traits and you take them constantly from the enlisted ranks, it's a disservice. Like, we have to have those traits in our enlisted ranks too. And the chance of being a Master Guns was kind of cool. Gunny's a pretty awesome rank.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. I think the most fun I ever had at any rank was a sergeant.
Same here.
There was those couple officers down there, Matt Roper. Right. I mean, he just let us loose.
He did. He did let us loose.
It was scary and fun all at the same time. But
they had mates for running the asylum out
definitely. But it was great, and so and just each rank I was like, wow, I'm at that next one, and I'm at that next one, and then I can definitely say Master Guns came quick. I mean, it's been long because we've been at war for a decade and a half, and there's been days that just felt like they were never going to end. But sitting here now looking at it, I'm like, what? 18 and a half years, like, what? Looking at retirement, like, I mean, I'll drop my appendix J here soon. Like, that's just, it's crazy to think. And I was never going to do more than that first enlistment,
Yeah.
Get my scholarship and go back to college. So
who would play Sara Clark in a film?
Okay, so this is actually a really funny story, and it's funny that you asked that question. So MCO, they were going to film this informational video, right? And Reagan, if you get a chance to interview about this, she starred in this thing. So they were filming in the office, and I did not want to be on camera. Did not. So I stayed gone the whole day, but I kept telling them every time they were like, hey, yeah, you're going to do this. You're going to talk about that. And I was like, no, I'm not. I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah.
And I said, listen, I have an agreement with my agent that if anytime there's going to be any movie or whatever, Natalie Portman is who's going to play me, to which of course everybody in the office was like, heck yeah, so Natalie Portman, definitely. Yep.
Natalie Portman.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Top Game Time Machine, a full time, space, and I transport you back to your time when you were a sergeant. Mm-hmm. You got 2 hours. What do you tell young Sarah?
Gosh. I don't know. I know what I would tell her, but I don't want to talk about it.
Or you could say it and we can redact it.
All
what
right.
would you tell her?
I would tell her see, all the bad stuff happened before Sergeant. So from there, I think I would just tell her like, hey, from here it's all right, I think that's the one change I'd have made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about when you started your family? You wish you'd have started before?
No.
That was perfect. Or perfect for you?
I would have waited even longer to be farther along in my career, so that Merrick wouldn't remember not having me as much, me being gone.
Yeah.
And Daddy traveling. I would have waited. I give mad props to the junior Marines that can be moms and do this. And God, I know it's such a fight too, because I know that there's no there's very rarely leaders that understand just how much.
Yeah.
And Dad's different. Dad's a different role. And
it
it's,
is.
And it's not less, and it's not demeaning that in any way. It's different.
It is.
And so, no, I'm glad I waited till the time I did. I was at senior commands when I was pregnant. I was taken care of. Unlike so many times I'd seen that happen out in, the tactical units and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, and just witnessed it at 3rd. I mean, that was a big, I went to the edge of getting
myself on this hill.
Yeah. I went to the edge of getting myself in some serious trouble, defending that and protecting that. And even some of the, the single dads and stuff, just not understanding the place that those individuals were in, and just leadership being inflexible to, they're human beings. Inside those uniforms are human beings, and they've got families, and those kids, those babies are important to them.
Yeah.
You take their babies out, you've ended that Marine's fight, period. We all know that for force protection reasons. We know that. So what are we doing as leaders when we're not paying attention to it? Why? And what does it hurt? I had a female show up with her baby who had a fucking fever, and she's in formation. I lost my shit. And I pulled the staff sergeant aside. I'm like, what the fuck's wrong with you? Why is she here? That baby's sick. Well, she's got to get the word, because you couldn't pick up the phone and call her. You couldn't call her after the formation and pass the goddamn word because that's how much you suck. How about if I made you bring your kids? Well, my wife stays home. Well, fucking great for you. She is wife. She is mom. The fuck? It eats me up. And we do a shit job of it. There's those leaders every once in a while, you get your pockets of excellence, but that's just what they are. They are pockets of excellence. And they're the ones that treat them like humans. We got asked this question at SEPME. The retired master guns that works there, he said, what do you do? And you're sitting there with master sergeants and first sergeants, and you could hear the first sergeant's answers coming from miles away. They 89-99 that thing, and it was rough. And you just sat there going, what the fuck, And then you could hear the ones that were they should be sergeant majors, They should be the ones that go on and influence and have that respect of, being the sergeant major to the commanding officer. Right. Because they had that humanity. You could hear those answers. The master sergeants, it was kind of, iffy. You take it or leave it or whatever. But at the end of the day, he wanted to spark this conversation. And there were things that were thrown out there, and he asked the question. He said, "You've got a single mom, and you PTs at 5 in the morning. What do you do? You're out at 29 Palms." I think that was the scenario he said, and this was something that he had done. And it was great because he was like, well, this is how I fucked it up, and he talked about, he forced her into a situation where, God bless her, she showed up with her kid in a running stroller. And all I could think was like, fuck yeah for her, good. Force it into your command's face, like, hey, human being, here's this baby 2-year-old in a running stroller at 5 o'clock in the morning. That's the answer.
That formation.
Right?
Does he got a glow belt on?
Right? What? And if she's going to run that PT with a running stroller, I mean, good resistance training, but still, I mean, but it was really, it's
but
frustrating.
She can't carry the guide on.
Run, swim, run. Like, But yeah, I mean, and no, I'm glad that I did it later on in my career. I also knew that I wanted to do things. I knew myself, and I knew I wasn't ready. And that was important. I didn't, I think a lot of unplanned, children, when you just, oops, I think that messes up a lot of stuff sometimes. And it's hard to come back from that. And there's those that are so successful at it, and that's awesome. And I have much respect. But I think a lot of times it ends up screwing stuff up in a way that's kind of hard to come back from. So
was this interview harder than you expected, or easier?
It's harder because there's things that I want to give you in the interview and I want to talk about, but I know that I won't allow you to put out there. So.
Does it feel dishonest?
Yeah. Because here's the thing, like, I know they need it.
Yeah.
But I also know too that I might be getting a call from Headquarters Marine Corps. So I don't want to put any leaders in a position where they have to feel like they have to say something about it. But I don't want to put myself out there that way. Because like this part right here I'm going to ask you to take out.
Yeah. I know.
That's what I want to talk about.
Yeah, I know.
I want to talk about how that shaped my career, how that made me want to go die on that hill, Yeah. And I want to let those that shit's happened to, let them know, like, the bad guys don't win. Even the ones that got away with it, they get theirs. It's gotten better because I think a lot of the victims and stuff like that want to talk about it. It's gotten worse in some regards because it's almost like, it's like a wound that's got too much attention.
Yeah.
It just doesn't have time to heal, but you don't want it to get infected. And so I don't know, like we said, I don't know what that balance is.
So I don't know, just to kind of flip the coin, is it possible? Could somebody make a mistake and then recover from that? Grow as a human being? So
the gender issue, it's interesting that you say had a daughter or got married or whatever. Here's the thing. Every single human being on this planet came from a woman. But every single one of them.
And I've told my boys this at every turn, that's someone's mother, that's someone's sister. But not everyone views it that way. I grew up around some savages that had no respect for women, girls. In some instances, I went along with it. In some instances, I didn't. But as I got older and my character started to form, and I started to identify that, wait a minute, I'm a leader, I'm not a follower, and I can dictate through just sheer force of personality and presence the type of behavior and activity that goes on around me. And I started to execute on that at a young age, like 10. And then as we got older, where my friends were promiscuous at best, I was a serial monogamist. It doesn't necessarily excuse some of the things that I did, that I was, one girl at a time. But, for a lot of my friends, because of their upbringing, their backgrounds, they didn't respect women.
Yeah.
Or they weren't even women. We were all kids, 15, 16, 17 years old, young ladies in the same way that I did. I still broke their hearts. But I was able to justify it by the fact that, well, I broke up with her and, it's okay. But there was nothing predatory that went on around me. But, in the Marine Corps, you don't necessarily have the background information to the guys to the left and right of you. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think, at least at some instances in that demographic, that behavior can present itself because they're still filling each other out and determining like who's going to be the one to establish what is acceptable decorum, or the etiquette, or the left and right lateral limits.
Right.
And me coming in at 23, I could do that easily.
Yeah.
Even with corporals and sergeants to a certain extent. Although I think I mentioned to you and Ann that there was an instance that I look back at that I didn't do that, and it still doesn't sit well with me. But how old were these guys? They're still fucking kids. They're responsible for their actions, but they're also a product of their environment.
Sure. And
their leadership has a role.
And some of the racial stuff's kind of coming back up. I have one of my sisters out in California. She's battling some stuff because she's black and she's got mixed kids, and she's like, I can't get stationed anywhere else. Get stationed. That's not even like live somewhere else. That's get stationed. I mean, that's with your Marine Corps family. And she's like, this is where it's okay. And she has to have those kind of considerations now. And that sucks. I mean, she's always had issues. She's, people throwing her race in her face and stuff, but it's, to heat back up and for her to say, I'm scared, especially scared for her girls, but at the time when it's going down and stuff like that's when the damage happens. So I think a lot of these people, if they would slow down what's going wrong, slow it down, step back out of it, and if you can't see clear to like get to, you're not going to do the right thing, get out of it and walk away from it. Don't be part of the mass, the mob.
It'll be interesting to see where we'll have to cut a lot of this. Yeah. But that's okay. That's okay. So I kind of talked about it at the very beginning. I feel that I wasn't there for my sisters when they needed me. My biological sisters, through certain instances in their lives. But I couldn't control that. I had chosen this life and have taken this path because it was something I needed to do. But along the way, I've met some remarkable women, and you're amongst them. And I appreciate the fact that I've been able to have such a great relationship, friendship over the years with you. And I don't think of you as a friend. You are definitely my sister. And if there's ever anything you need from me, hermana, I will always be there for you.
Yeah, there's a few of you that are definitely my brothers. Yeah, you're among them.
So thanks for agreeing to do this. I know this wasn't easy. And of course, there'll be a lot of tape on the floor.
It's not the whole thing. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see what we can salvage. But the
thing is the anybody can reach out to me.
Yeah,
and I'll give it to you that way, But I think this way, when there's the keyboard warriors that are just going to they just have to, this is going to be their, their crusade.
Well, this hill I'll die on.
Yeah. So, and it's not for them. I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care what they think. Who gives a shit? Honestly, it's shit that they're thinking anyways. But the ones that need it, that's where like it feels disingenuous kind of.
Right.
Because I know that there's those ones like Root, when she came and sat down with me, and she was like, is there ever a tour where this wasn't an issue? And I was like, sadly, no. It has been a fight every tour. One way or another, it's a fight. And she was like, I'm just tired and I want to raise my babies. I was like, go raise your babies. Yeah. And I've heard so many junior females say that, and I don't fault them, I don't fault any Marine that just wants to do one tour and get out. Just wants to do the time they want to do and get out. Thank you for your service.
Right.
But yeah, a lot of them, they ask about the family aspect of it, and it's tough. It's tough to be mom and be a Marine.
And with that, we're out.